Story 1. Mill tried to secretly change my baby's name behind my back after she demanded that I name the baby after her. So I banned her from coming near my child. I 31F, am an expecting mom. My baby girl is due in 5 weeks and I can't wait to see her and take her in my arms. You understand my feelings, don't you? Your flesh and blood, whom you are carrying inside of you for 40 weeks. It's just so magical to finally take them in your arms. I'm already crying. So, amidst all this feeling of anticipating your baby, in a dilemma of childbirth, my Mill is playing her own dirty game of naming my baby after her own name, Susan. Yeah, she wants my baby to be named Susan. Ever since we got to know that it's a baby girl, she has been pestering us to name her Susan. She said it was her family tradition to name the baby after the grandparent's name. However, my husband is not named after his dad's father's name. Instead, he was named after Susan's dad. You see the hypocrisy, and that's why I don't want to fall for it. Had it really been a tradition, I would have given it a thought. When she first brought up this topic, I didn't get bothered a lot. I thought it was just her suggestion. It was in my 5th-month antenatal visit that we got to know that it's a girl. We organized the gender reveal party in my 7th month. And since then, she's been behind me. A week later, at my gender reveal party, she showed up at our house, saying she just wanted to check up on me. My husband wasn't home. She was like, "Oh, then it's a baby girl?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Then it's my little Susan inside of you." I really didn't get her. I just gave a confused smile. I didn't know if it was supposed to be just a way of saying that my daughter is the heir of her family or something. I just let it slide. A few days later, she again showed up. She asked about my health and asked me if I was feeling the baby's movement. I said, "Yes, I feel it, but now I think she's sleeping because I haven't felt her for a while." She was like, "Oh, my little Susan must be resting." This happened quite a few times until I wasn't able to hold back myself and asked her what she meant and why she kept calling my baby Susan. You see, I asked my husband also about his mom calling my baby Susan. He just nods his head and says he has no idea. So, I had to ask her because it was bothering me. She said the baby is supposed to be named Susan, after her grandmother's name, which is her. I asked her why. She said it was the family tradition to name the baby after grandparents. My mind got blown up on hearing this, and I couldn't think of anything to give her back or decline her suggestion. So I just stood quiet and didn't say anything. She understood from my flustered face and my body language that I didn't like it, but she doesn't care. My equation with my Mill has never been good. Right after I got married to my husband, she has been a wicked lady. My husband is a non-nonsense person and doesn't want to get into any family drama. When he saw that we were not getting along together, he just asked me to stay away from my Mill. I gladly stepped aside. I mean, why not? Who wants to deal with that woman? So, due to my husband's shield, my Mill had zero influence on my life, and I couldn't thank my husband enough for this. But with my pregnancy kicking in, she has again started poking her nose in my business. She visits me often to apparently check on my health, but now I know she was here for her hidden motive. This has been happening for over a month now, and my pregnancy hormone has been tested to the core. So yesterday, I let it loose on Susan. She came in the afternoon when my husband was not around. One more thing, I don't know why she deliberately shows up just when I'm about to take an afternoon nap. That's another thing that pisses me off. You know how fatigue kicks in the 3rd trimester. Thankfully, I work from home, which gives me the flexibility to work at my schedule. Even with that, you don't get to lie down whenever you want. For my work, afternoons are a little slumber, so I use that window for a quick nap, and my Mill shows up just then. When I heard the doorbell, I instantly knew it was her. For a moment, I thought to ignore it, but that would have led to another chaos. Last time, I tried to ignore her door knock, but she panicked, called my husband that I wasn't responding, and there might be an emergency. My husband rushed home. I had to pretend that I was sleeping with my earphones on. So, you see, this is what she does. So, I answered the doorbell, but I was also adamant about giving her back this time if she ever called my baby a Susan. I sat with her for a couple of minutes and then headed back to my workstation. Working was still better than sitting and killing time with her. God, I was so annoyed with her that I wanted her to bring up the topic of baby naming, and I give it back to her. When I was leaving for my workstation, she said, "Okay, I'll leave. You take care of my little Susan." That was it. I came back and sat with her on the couch and asked her if she was serious about naming the baby. She said, "Yes." I told her, with a straight face, that I didn't want to name my baby to be Susan. She was like, "Why not? It's such a beautiful name, and besides, it's a tradition." I wanted her to say this. I asked if this was a tradition, and why was my husband not named after his dad's father. He was instead named after Susan's father. She fumbled for an answer, and before she could make any false stories, I said, "If that's the tradition, I would name my daughter on my mom's name." Oh my God! She didn't see that coming. Her face was flustered, and she just got up and stormed out of the house, saying something under her breath. I was so relieved to see her going. I just wish she doesn't show up again. When my husband came in the evening, he asked me if his mom was here. I said, "Yes." He nodded and didn't say anything. I asked him what's up. He said nothing, just that his mom called him, and she was angry that I didn't agree to name my daughter Susan, and instead I wanted to name her on my mom's name. I asked him, and he just laughed and said, "You know how Mom is. She said that you insulted her and asked her to leave and never show her face." I rolled my eyes and said, "I wish I said that." He asked me to relax and ignore her. I know my husband is such a doll, and I adore him for that. But you see how she tries to manipulate my husband against me. Lord is kind to me that my husband is not influenced by her, else she would have ruined my marriage. Update 1. Hello people. I'm over the moon holding my gorgeous baby in my arms while writing this. She is a week old. I know last time I said she was due in 5 weeks, but she arrived 2 weeks early. She was so eager to see Mama. After that confrontation with Mill, I thought my problem is over and that she is not going to put her foot on my business again. But damn, I underestimated that woman. A few days later, my Phil called my husband and said that Susan was very upset because I misbehaved with her. She is not eating properly, not taking her meds, and not talking to anyone. She was just sobbing and sulking over the fact that I had refused to name my baby as Susan and also threatened to ban Susan for my daughter. That's not true at all. I never said that. My husband said that I was at the peak of my pregnancy, and at that moment he was not going to stress me with these stupid things. Though I had unwavering support from my husband, my blood boiled on hearing these false accusations. Phil insisted my husband come over and talk to Susan. The next day, my husband visited her. She faked tears and went overboard with her lies. To calm her down, he apologized on my behalf. She said she doesn't need an apology, but to have a granddaughter named after her. My husband said that it was our baby, and it should be our decision. It led to some arguments, where Susan threw that she would cut us off if we didn't oblige to her request. It wasn't a request, though. It was an order, and she was adamant about enforcing it. When my husband said this, I said to myself, fine by me. But whatever it is, she is his mother, and I cannot be that mean to him to say this up front. He didn't say anything at that time, but 2 to 3 days later, he casually suggested that I keep the official name of the baby whatever I wanted and let's call her Susan as the pet name. I was aghast. Why the hell I would call her Susan? I don't want to spell or hear Susan in my house, and keeping my daughter's pet name as Susan breaks the purpose of my refusal. I denied it up front. He got agitated and said that we needed to find a middle ground, and this was the only solution. He said if I didn't like the idea, we could have her official name as Susan and call her whatever I wanted at home. I said, no, that's not happening. He was not happy with my response, but I was not in a good physical and mental state to get into a fight, so he didn't say anything further. Eventually, we got busy shopping for the baby and setting up the house for her. My labor also kicked in after a few days, so we didn't discuss the topic after that day, though it was there on the back of my head, but I ignored it. My contraction started early, and within a few days my baby was crowning. Our close family and friends visited us, but Susan was nowhere to be seen. I was discharged from the hospital in 2 days. Yesterday, my husband addressed the elephant in the room. He was like, so, you're still sticking to your decision of not naming the baby after Mom? It was such a beautiful moment of us cuddling our newborn, and he brought up this topic. I wasn't in a mood to fight, I asked him what did he want. He said, "What's the harm in letting his side of the family call the baby Susan, while I can keep her official name whatever I wanted?" I ultimately gave in, but I strictly warned that neither I nor he would call her by that name, Susan, and Phil could call her whatever they wanted. He was happy with that. Though I agreed to it, I'm not having a very good feeling about it. I mean, that woman didn't even show up to see my daughter, and she wants her to be named after her. She was so arrogant that she didn't even put her guard down to see her granddaughter. So why do I need to agree to her demands? Now that I have agreed with my husband, I don't know how to retract from here. I also know that it might lead to a disagreement with my husband, which I really don't at this point of time. That man has been really supportive of me all this while, and I don't want to get into any fights with him. I really don't know what to do. Update 2. This Susan woman is not leaving any stone unturned to satisfy her fake ego. As I mentioned earlier, I agreed to let my husband's family call my baby Susan. Mill finally visited us to see her granddaughter. She came up with huge banners and posters with, "Welcome baby Susan," "Love you Susan," and all that. Almost everything she carried had either Susan written on it, or it was with an initial S. My daughter's name starts with R, by the way. Also, my Mill's favorite color is green, so everything she brought for my daughter was green. I'm not being petty to call out this, but she is obsessed with herself, her name, her color. Oh my God. I mean, have you ever seen a baby top to bottom covered in grass green? Green onesies, green mittens, and green socks. I didn't know that they manufacture baby items in this color until I saw it. She didn't say anything to me, neither asked about my health. She gave me cold shoulders, and so did I. She just kept calling my baby Susan excessively, maybe just to annoy me. She just went so overboard in showing her love that she messed up with my daughter's sleep cycle. I did subtly try to say that it was her nap time, but she just ignored my existence. I wanted to snatch my baby from her arms, but my husband wasn't around, and I just didn't want to get into a new fight with her. She would have exaggerated the entire thing to create a whole new story. As soon as she left, I got rid of all the greenery she had put on my baby. LOL. There were many weird and silly things Mill had pulled off in the last 3 months, like creating a social media page for my baby with the name, Baby Susan, and posting her pictures and videos. I know a lot of parents do this for their infants and toddlers these days, but I'm not in favor of doing this a lot. The social media pressure of getting likes and comments subjects a baby to a very superficial sense of beauty and liking, and I don't want my daughter to have early access to this superficial world. In fact, I also don't post pictures of her from my account, except for the baby announcement. I haven't put up anything, but this woman has no chills. There is not a single day when she has not posted my daughter's pictures. How does she get so many pictures? Well, she clicks. She visits us every other day and clicks as many photos as she wants. We can't say no to her visit or to her clicks. It annoys me to the core, but what can I do? I mean, how do I ban her from meeting her granddaughter when she's not troubling her or any of us? Whatever, this is a very silly thing compared to what she has done now. My baby turned 3 months old 2 weeks back, so we took her to our family church to get her baptized. During the event, when the priest started the procedure, he called my daughter Susan. I was shocked. He was reading the name through a paper, which I realized was the form I filled out while registering for the service. I felt embarrassed to do so, but I stopped him midway and said that my daughter's name was not Susan, and that I had not filled Susan in the form, but her real name. Mill tried to intervene, but I ignored her and continued to ask the priest about it. He exchanged looks with Mill and said that Mill had visited the church a few days back and said that the form filled by me had an error, and she filled a new form where she changed the name of my baby to Susan. I requested the priest to spell out the name of my daughter, which I have mentioned. My Mill works for the church. She does some kind of bookkeeping work for the church. I'm not very sure. She is on good terms with the priest and other members of the church. She used it to access and replace the form that I had filled out for the baptism service. This confrontation led to chaos. My husband intervened and asked me to calm down. He said that the name actually didn't matter much. I know it doesn't to that extent. The person getting baptized matters more than the name, but still there are sentiments attached to it. The name mentioned on the baptism document matters to me at least, and how dare she pull such a petty thing behind my back. I might have acted immature, but I was done with her. She was making my life miserable. She had pushed all my buttons, and I wanted to cut her off from my daughter's life. After the ceremony, we had organized a lunch for the close family and friends. Susan was also a part of it. I was in a pathetic mood after that incident. My parents and sister tried to cheer me up. That's the best thing about having a baby. They don't let you stay sad. Seeing them smile lightens up your deepest sorrow. I enjoyed it for a brief moment when Susan decided to spoil it. When all the other guests went, and it was just our parents in the house, Susan brought up that topic as how I yelled at her in front of everyone in the church. She suddenly started sobbing. She was all very cheerful until now. She's such an imposter. My parents said that it was our family matter, and they would take a leave. They left, glad they did, because I didn't want them to be a part of Susan's victim show. After they left, Susan became more vicious, blaming me for manipulating her son against her and whatnot. I heard all of it patiently, then took my daughter in my arms and went inside my room. While leaving, I just said that your son is a free and wise man. But if you want, you can take him and tuck him in your skirts or chain him into your wrist. She got so furious at this. I tell you. But I ignored her and stormed inside my room and bolted it. Even from inside my room, I could hear her yelling on top of her voice. Occasionally, I heard my husband's voice as well. Continued for more than an hour. When they were gone, my husband knocked on the bedroom door. I opened it, thinking that he would be angry at me for creating a fuss in front of everyone in the church and then having a big mouth for his mom. But I was surprised at his gesture. He hugged me and said, "Sorry." He said he shouldn't have pestered me to let them call my daughter Susan. She was our baby, and it should be our choice as to what we want her to be called. He said that he had banned his mom from our house and from our daughter's life until we felt comfortable because she was creating trouble in our life. The first year of the baby's life is supposed to be the best period for the parents, and Susan was ruining that for us. He also made it clear that our baby would have just one name, which we have given her, and everyone should call her by that. I was shocked. I didn't see that coming. I asked him what made him say so and why did he suddenly change sides when he was the one asking me to calm down in the church and telling me that name doesn't matter during baptism. He said that after the ceremony, he heard Mill talking to his aunt, bitching about me and swearing to separate me from the baby. She was saying that she could go to any lengths to preserve her name in the next generation and would also babysit my daughter when I resumed work and would eventually manipulate the baby against me. It was so evil of her. My husband said he was waiting for all the guests to leave so that he could confront Susan about this. But gladly, Susan brought up the topic, making it easier for him. Obviously, Susan didn't like the confrontation because she was caught off guard. She called him simp and other derogatory names, but he stood on his grounds to not let her enter our personal space. My Phil also rebuked her for her evil tactics and asked her to stay away from us. My husband said if he let her in our space, she would ruin all the occasions of our baby's life, and we can't let that happen. I couldn't believe that he took such a harsh step to protect our daughter and my interests. So, Susan is temporarily banned from our lives until she mends her way, which I highly doubt she would. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. My family is extremely toxic and abusive, and I'm planning to run away for good. My mom did something that's making me second-guess everything, and I'm lost. I posted about this once before, although it was deleted. Basically, I have a crap life where I currently am and I always have. My parents are and always have been extremely abusive. My father takes most of my money and always has since I was 14. He says it's his money. I'm 23 and he's still doing this. He literally only ever talks to me about money. We have that kind of relationship. My mother is emotionally neglecting and again, always has been. She has bipolar disorder and has said and done some really awful things to me in her bad moments. I don't even want to get into the things that she has put me through. I still love them both, of course, but I can't do this anymore. I decided a while ago that I was leaving here and starting a new life on the West Coast. Today, I changed my number and bought my plane ticket. They think my phone is shut off due to non-payment. They have no idea about anything that I plan to do, and I don't want to tell them. Well, today I came home and found a piece of art hung up on my wall. My mom had mentioned it to me in her good moments. I forgot what the art style is called, but it's a bunch of little bead things that you carefully put together to make a picture. It's her new hobby lately, and I'm so happy that she's found something that seems to take her away from her mental agony. She was so excited to give it to me just the other day. She smiled and said she made me something nice and that it was almost done. Took her weeks and weeks to make this for me. I walked into my room, I saw it, and I just started crying. I know I need to leave. I do. I need to start a new life and I need to get away from here. I can't be happy here. I know I can't. This family has broken me into so many different pieces over the past 23 years. I just feel so guilty. I saw this picture and I immediately felt horrible. I have always tried so hard to be a bright light in my family and make things less toxic, but it's never worked. I feel like I failed, and I'm giving up now. She is going to miss me. I know she is. She is going to wonder about me. She is going to cry all the time. She is going to be so sad, and although I've bought this plane ticket and I'm not turning back, and I know that this is what I need to do for me, I still feel like the shittiest person in the world. I just needed to tell someone this. I leave next week. I am just so upset after seeing that she hung her present to me on my wall while I was away. Some comments speculated that the mother's awareness of OP's plan might be the reason for her action. OP's response was the following. I almost told her a few days ago because I felt so guilty. I told her that there was something very important that I had to say to her and I was shaking, but I was too scared to actually tell her, so instead, I had to quickly make up a lie, which ended up just me telling her that I have an STD. I don't know. It's the only thing I could think of that would also give me a reaction like that when telling someone. I don't have any STDs, but she seemed to have bought the lie and moved on. But perhaps she knows something. I did tell my little brother, and him and I are very close. I don't think in a million years he would have told them. There's a 0.1% chance he did that. My dad also has cameras with audio planted all around the house, and although I've tried my very best not to talk about it around them or in the house in general, maybe they picked up something. I also don't even think he views them that much, but maybe he does. I don't know. OP also added in the comments, I love my mother. She is abusive and that will never be okay. But she has mental illness. It's never an excuse, but I still love her. And in her good moments, when she smiles and tells me about something amazing that happened to her that day, I get very emotional because I wish she could always be that way. I wish so much that she would never go back to being horrible, but she always does. I was thinking about taking the art piece with me. I hope she notices it's gone. I hope that will tell her how much I appreciate her in her good moments, and that when she does do something nice for me, which is and always has been very rare, I hope she will see that it means the absolute world to me and I never want to let go of those memories. My parents are getting old and have a lot of health issues, especially my mom. I would be so heartbroken if something happened to her a week after I left and she thought I didn't love her. I would never forgive myself. I'm getting emotional thinking about this, and I think I'm being dramatic, but I don't know. This is what worries me when I think about my mom. I do plan on leaving a note. I've tried writing some, but every time I just get very angry and start listing all the things my parents have done wrong to me. Every time it starts to just sound hateful and horrible. I don't want them to think I'm leaving because of them. I'm leaving because of me. They're a factor in why I feel so horrible, but ultimately I'm doing this for me. Update 1. I'm posting an update as I know a lot of people ask me to keep updating. So I actually did it. I said goodbye to my few friends here. I packed all of my stuff in a suitcase. I read a post on this sub earlier where someone said it's funny how your entire life can fit inside a suitcase. He was right, and you really start to feel bad when it comes down to this, and you realize that you don't need much of what you have at all. I was scared that the things I loved most wouldn't all fit in my suitcase. I ended up having space left over. Most of us live very selfishly. My little brother drove me here to the airport. I love him. I hugged him and told him that I loved him, and I gave him my car as he needed one for work, and he's never had much either. My parents only really love my older brother, their firstborn. I told him that if our parents ask, to tell them that I asked him to take me to the airport, and I just gave him my car keys and left. He knows everything, but they don't need to know that. I also gave him my fish, which oddly I already missed them. It's really weird how taking care of even the smallest of creatures can make you feel so special. That helped a lot with my depression. I didn't tell my parents anything. They don't know anything. The last thing that my father said to me was, "You need to cut the front yard," and he walked away. I don't even remember the last thing that my mother said to me. I left them a note that said that I'm safe, I'm going to be okay. But I had to leave. I told them I would reach out when I was ready, if ever. I told them that I'll always love them, for they are my parents and they gave me life. I wonder how they're going to react when they see the note. I imagine my father will be furious, as he can't coerce me into giving him all of my money anymore. My mother is just going to use it to get pity because her life is such a tragedy, at least according to her book of faces. Perhaps they should have treated me better, as I'm the best son they could have ever asked for. I'm kind, I'm empathetic, I'm ambitious, and I am full of love, but even I have my breaking point, and I'm going to find new people to give my love, people who will appreciate it. So anyways, yeah, I did it. I packed a suitcase that is my life. I grabbed the bracelet that my old friend who passed away gave me and put it around my wrist. I put on my favorite pair of beat-up boots and cuffed my jeans, and I left. I'll be so far away in 12 hours. They won't ever be able to hurt me again. I randomly ran into my ex-boyfriend here at the airport just a few minutes ago. We didn't end things well when we broke up 2 years ago. Coincidentally, it ended because he told me I was being ridiculous for rebelling against my parents' abuse, and that I should be grateful to them for even being alive. He was in a rush, but he smiled and asked how I was doing, and he proposed that we should catch up when I got back from wherever I was going. I smiled at him. I told him I was doing well, and I said, "I'll let you know when I get back. I feel very whole right now for the first time in my life." Edit. I'm going to take this opportunity to be my dramatic self and say that I genuinely am in tears in this airport at how supportive you all are. I cannot believe I just recently discovered Reddit. I was truly missing out. Also, as an update, it's 10:19 a.m. and I am in NYC at the airport here. My flight was delayed, but finally it took me from my home to here in an hour. I'm boarding my flight to take me to my new home in California. Edit 2. I'm moving to Los Angeles. My parents don't know yet, but will definitely update when they find out. My brother and I are in close communication about this. I do have somewhere to stay when I get there, no job yet, but that'll be easy. I just wanted to answer some questions that I was getting a lot. I was married when I was younger, and we moved away, got divorced 2 years and a few months ago. I never thought I would have to explain and justify 23 years of abuse because 1 or 2 people on here wanted to call me a liar. Can't imagine being that hateful to a stranger. Thank you though to everyone else that is supportive. Final update. I have arrived in LA at 2:47 p.m. The air here is amazing. I feel completely renewed, and I've been here for 10 minutes. So beautiful. Anyways, I'm going to drop my stuff off and take a hike with my best friend. Thanks for listening until next time. OP made one last comment. I'm sure this is going to be lost in the comments or whatever, but it was really sweet to see everyone's responses and compassion for my stories. Yes, definitely post pictures of my butthole sometimes, but other than that, I think I live a pretty normal life now, lol. Sorry, I thought I deleted them, haw. Los Angeles was really hard. I mean, I just couldn't after some point, you know. I tried for a long time to make it happen, but it's a dangerous place, especially for someone who was as weak as I was at that time. I did what I had to survive, and it was not always pretty. I think I started realizing that I wasn't living, just, I don't know, surviving. I was always in survival mode. It was chaos, and I moved there to start living, not just keep surviving. Anyways, I ended up moving back closest to my family. There have been ups and downs, but I am mostly in a healthy place with where I am with them. I might say a small hi in text every couple of months, whatever. But the thing is that I feel comfortable with the space that I have put in between us. I never felt that way before. I felt I was trapped in that life. You never really are, you know. I got an associate degree in cybersecurity, got on and then off of drugs, and now I am pursuing my bachelor's in computer science. Yes, it kind of happened just like that abruptly, that jarringly. I live with myself and my dog Willow. She's about 2 years old now. I rescued her from an organization that found her plus her siblings on the side of the road in a cardboard box. She is my very best friend because she has seen my ugliest moments, my worst moments, and my very best. I only wish that I could have taken her family with me. I hope she doesn't think about that. Maybe that's just my own guilt in my own life, but I want her to be loved. My brother did do that thing. I don't really want to touch much on that. Nobody believed me, and I have come to peace with it myself, I guess, as much as one can. I don't know, that was just bizarre. A few weeks ago, I was diagnosed with DID. I haven't really told anyone. I don't think it makes me much different. I still feel, like a human. Sometimes, though, it does feel like I have moments where I go away. I don't notice it at all while it's happening. Only afterward I realized that I just lost like 2 hours of time and I have no idea what happened. It's always been that way. I thought this was normal. It isn't, obviously. But I don't know, my therapist and I are working on it and other things, and I am becoming happier. I thought that this would happen in a day or a week, that I would just be happy, by changing small or sometimes big aspects of my life. Takes a long time. I am better though most of the time, and that's better than it was before, so I am grateful for that. I hope that one day when and if I ever get to a place where I can help someone that was in my position, like so many people did for me back then, I hope that I never forget what any of it felt like. I hope that I am as kind and generous as many of them were. My life has changed me in many ways, but I think I am so humbled, and I have seen a side of life that not everyone gets or wants to see, but it made me a better person, I hope. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I came home early to surprise my wife and caught her red-handed with another man in our backyard. Here is my story. My wife and I were married for only a year and some months before we divorced. Bella and I met at a restaurant where I had gone to have dinner one evening. She was sitting at a table alone while waiting for her plus one who never showed up, and I thought of keeping her company. Though she wasn't in her best mood when we met, we had a nice conversation. After weeks of occasionally talking on Facebook, we had our first date, and everything from there was happily ever after. We married after a year of dating, and I earnestly believed Belle would be the last woman he would date. I was tired of going through the cycle of talking with different women who would cheat on me. We were almost like the perfect couple, and there was absolutely nothing wrong in our relationship. We treated each other with love and respected each other. Bea and I were both hardworking, and I loved her because she was career-focused and did everything she could to earn more. Unlike Belle, who was a full-time remote worker, I only stayed home on my day off, and I barely took days off because something always came up at work. My work demanded that I'd travel from place to work for our clients. Even with my busy schedule, I did my best to spend time with Belle. I had great plans for us, and with her collaboration, I knew we could have a beautiful and memorable future. If I continued working so hard most of the time, I wasn't so pleased with my busy schedule because I missed spending time with Belle, and I didn't like it when she complained about my absence too much. To make up for always being away, I would buy her beautiful gifts and have flowers sent to her at home. Also, I didn't wait for us to have special occasions before I took her to a fancy dinner or mini vacation. The sweet thing about Belle was, she always knew how to reciprocate or make me feel loved. There was a time when I returned from a week of working in another state, and Belle paid for a massage session and gifted me the latest release of Jordan sneakers. Aside from that gift, she cooked special meals, set up our home table for romantic dinners, and did other things. Because of Belle, I always looked forward to going home. But one day, I went home without informing her in advance, and our marriage took a different direction after that day. Usually, each time I returned from a trip out of town, I'd tell Belle in advance so she could prepare for me or cook something, but that day, I dropped by her favorite restaurant and grabbed some takeout for us and a bottle of red wine. I wanted it to be a pleasant surprise for her, but I ended up being the surprised one. When I got to our house, I pulled over in the driveway as usual and walked into the house with the stuff I got. As soon as he entered, I noticed Belle was half-dressed, flustered, and sweaty, the kind of sweat that showed she was doing very hard labor. She was already acting all edgy, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said she acted that way because she was surprised to see me, and she was sweaty and almost half-naked because of the summer sun. That felt very suspicious, but I almost believed her lie because it didn't even cross my mind that she could bring her affair partner to our house. As we were conversing about my trip and how I had to come home earlier than expected, I heard our backyard go off. I wanted to look at the security cameras to see what was happening, but Belle tried to stop me. She said it was probably nothing, and I shouldn't worry because the sensor had gone off 3 times already that day. That was odd coming from Bell because in the past, even if he wanted to sit in front of the computer and look at the security cameras all day, Belle never complained or tried to stop me. So she literally ratted herself out when she tried to stop me from looking at the cameras. I actually ignored her and then looked at the security camera, and I saw our 2 dogs attacking a man in my backyard. I was shocked to see him, and Belle pretended to be surprised. She said he had broken into our house, and she was trying to catch him when I came home, and she didn't want to tell me so I wouldn't yell at her for not locking the doors. As much as that lie sounded believable, my guts told me something was wrong. I told her we should call the police, and as soon as I said that, she kicked against the idea. She said we shouldn't get the police involved or we would have to pay for our dogs attacking the man in the backyard. I was getting mad at this point, so I called the police and reported that someone was trespassing on our property. Shortly after the police arrived, I called the dog off him, and Belle's app came out of the place he squeezed himself into. He had sustained injuries and told the police our dogs attacked him. When he said that, I told the police he had trespassed on our property, and that's why he got attacked. Belle's app overheard me, and he started shouting that he had come to spend quality time with Belle, and that he was with Belle the previous night. It turned out that Belle was having an affair with him, and he met him from the book club she belonged to. When he said that, Belle was horrified. She tried to shut him up in my presence, but the guy kept yelling and said he didn't want to be charged for trespassing when we invited him. That wasn't all. His affair with Belle had been going on for a while, and that wasn't his first time sleeping over. After her secret was exposed, Belle was so embarrassed because our nosy neighbors had come out to listen to everything. Words cannot express how I felt when I found that the woman I was planning my forever with was doing another man in my own house. After the police left, I went inside the house and threw out her stuff out of anger. I retrieved most of the things I bought for her and set them ablaze. The neighbors were still there, and they watched as I publicly humiliated her. I threw out our wedding portrait and other things that reminded me of our union. She was even shameless to keep begging me to let her explain. She said she only invited him over so they could read a book together, and nothing was happening between her and her app. I knew they were all lies and didn't listen to her. By the time I was done dumping her stuff outside, she had to call her younger sister to come and pick her up. I also left the house that day to clear my head. I went to my best friend's house, and after that, I put myself together. I contacted a divorce lawyer to start preparing our divorce papers. In my life, I had never experienced that level of betrayal. She shattered me completely and destroyed the possibility of me ever loving or trusting a woman again. For nights, the memories haunted me, and the memories took its mental toll on me. Even after we divorced, I was still a shadow of myself, and it took me a long time to heal and forget about her. Even though 2 years have passed, I still feel that the next woman I might end up with will cheat on me again. Because of this, I keep shutting out or hurting every woman that comes my way. Anyway, I know it will take time for me to heal, and until that happens, I will focus more on working and earning more for the comfort of my future. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Gold digger mom stole my entire college fund for her 4th wedding. So I crashed the ceremony wearing a custom t-shirt exposing her and got her arrested. I lost my grandma when I was 18. She was a tough, non-nonsense woman who ran her own upholstery business for 5 decades and raised 3 kids. My mom being the middle child. Often, she clashed with her. When I was young, I would often see my grandma and my mom fighting for small things, and would wonder why until I realized that my grandma hated my mother because of me. For context, according to my aunt, my parents never really wanted me. They harbored resentment towards me from the moment I came into the world. For the initial 6 months of my life, I lived with her and my grandma. However, when I started growing up, my grandma forced my parents to buckle up and take responsibility. As a child, I remember I was subjected to numerous derogatory names by my parents, particularly from my dad, like bimbo or dumbo if I made a slight mistake, which was really hurtful to hear. Interestingly, despite these labels, I happened to be the most academically inclined among my cousins. Thanks to my parents' encouragement from a young age, I've developed a passion for pursuing a science degree. My parents would beat me up for what seemed like trivial reasons, such as wearing nail polish or talking to a boy, My dad never let me wear makeup, disapproved of my tight clothes, even if it's just yoga pants with a long shirt, and basically anything associated with being a girl. Keep in mind that I was still growing, and his controlling nature affected me a lot. When my parents used to fight, it always seemed to somehow become my fault. On top of that, my mom consistently complained that I didn't contribute around the house. The reality was that I was taught from a very early age to help them out. I folded at least 2 loads of laundry every day, cleaned one of the bathrooms daily, handled the dishes, and took care of various other chores like sweeping the floors. Despite all this, I never uttered a complaint about it, but my parents never appreciated it. It felt like I was an unappreciated maid at their home. Back then, I used to do most of the things my parents told me to do and avoided anything they didn't mention. I refrained from drinking, stayed away from drugs, and made sure not to wear what they deemed exposing clothes. Unfortunately, I wasn't allowed to go out with friends, even for birthdays, and having them over was also off limits. There were times when I'd come up with excuses to stay later at school during the daytime because I enjoyed spending time with others outside the confines of my home. However, everything changed when my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Even though I hated my dad for always trying to control my life, I still didn't want him to die. But my mom clearly didn't think this way. She left my dad, saying she did not want to be stuck with an ill husband. My dad and I were shocked when we watched her pack her bags and leave. Later, my dad broke down sitting on the porch. Even though I was just 14 years old, I could understand his pain. I had always seen him sit and drink a beer on the porch whenever he was having a bad day. So when I heard him crying, I got him a beer from the fridge. My dad started bawling when he noticed that I was handing him the beer, and he understood that I was trying to comfort him in the only way I knew. Since that day, I don't know how or why, but everything changed between me and my dad. He was not rude or abusive to me anymore. I can even venture to say that he was a good father. After my mom left, in the following weeks, my parents got divorced, which was easy since my dad had a prenup with her, and she could not take any alimony. By next month, my mom had already moved in with her new boyfriend, who was apparently her high school sweetheart, Morty. During this time, my mom hated having me for the weekends. Whenever my dad would drive me to drop me off, she would make up some excuses about why she could not see me the weekend. It really hurt me because it felt like my mom had divorced me along with my dad. Throughout all this, my grandma continued to visit me, and I loved spending time with her. She would call me and all my cousins once a month to have a sleepover at her house, which is still one of my favorite memories to date. 5 months after my parents' divorce, of course, my mom got married again. Her high school sweetheart, Morty, bought a house for my mom in hopes that they could grow their family together. However, my mom had other plans. Whenever I would get to visit her, which was rare, I would always find my mom on her phone giggling and talking to someone with not a care in the world. She would only cut off the call once it was time for Morty to come back home. Apparently, Morty eventually found out that she had been cheating with another guy, and they had a huge fight. However, my mother managed to convince him that it was just a one-time mistake, so they stayed together. During this time, my dad's health was not improving from his cancer. In his last days, he would spend time with me as much as he could. I would come back home from school terrified, thinking something might have happened to him. Unfortunately, one night, my dad passed away in his sleep after months of chemo not working. My grandma and my dad's family were the first ones to reach me, as I just could not stop crying. When my mom came over, she was alone, and there was no Morty in sight. I did not know this then, but my mom had continued to talk to the other guy behind Morty's back, and he had finally left. Throughout my dad's funeral, my mom kept saying how my dad's death could not have come at a worse timing, since she was already dealing with a lot. Everyone was so shocked and irritated by her callousness. When Dad's will was left, it was declared that all his assets would be going to me immediately. My mother seemed very interested to be back in my life. However, my grandma did not want me living with my mother since she knew the kind of daughter she had raised. She knew my mother wanted me for the money my dad had left behind for me. She and my aunt helped me sell all my dad's assets so they could open a college trust fund in my name. However, because I was still a minor, my mother's name also had to be added. Meanwhile, Morty, my mom's husband, divorced her during this period. And since they had no prenup, she ended up with a substantial settlement. That's why Grandma warned her not to dip into my funds, emphasizing that she already had her own money. My mom agreed to this arrangement. When Mom and I started living together, it felt at first like I was living with a stranger. She had changed so much over the years, and not in a good way at all. All she ever did was behave like a teenager herself. She would get dressed up and go out every night. She would come back home late at night with strange men and take them into her bedroom. Every morning, I would walk into the kitchen and notice someone different. It became a daily routine. When I turned 16, my mom introduced me to her third husband, Joe. Right from the start, it was clear he didn't like me. His behavior towards me was mean and unnecessarily critical. Whenever I raised the issue with my mom, she confronted him, leading to even more covert and behind-the-back hostility. Then, when my brother arrived 10 months later, my mom's narrative shifted to paint Joe as a good person deep down, and that apparently, he struggled to express himself. I was encouraged not to resent him, but to be more understanding. However, Joe had no issues showering love on my baby brother, Brad. Oddly, my mom confided in me several times that she had nothing in common with Joe, but she had married him because he would provide us with a stable family. This was far from the truth because my mom and Joe would have nasty fights, especially after Brad was born. Joe did not want my mother to spend any time with me and would yell at her if she was not anywhere near Brad. He would tell me things like how he wished I would have died with my dad or I lived with my grandma because he wanted his son to get all the love and attention. It was hurtful and mentally exhausting to live with him, where I was clearly not wanted. Every time I would beg or question my mother about why she stayed with him, she would skillfully change the subject. One day, my mother and Joe left us with my grandma so they could go out with their mutual friends and have a good time. This had initially started as once or twice a month, but had moved on to them doing it almost every weekend. They would usually ask me to watch Brad while they were out, but that night I was studying for my exam, so they dropped us both off at Grandma's. I loved spending time with her, and she usually cooked really tasty dishes for me while I could study peacefully. Brad was playing with his toys on the living room floor. My grandma had strictly told my parents that they should be back by 11 o'clock to pick us up. However, even after 11 p.m., my parents had not come back. I was starting to get worried as I had my exams the next day, and I also needed to put Brad to bed on time, otherwise Joe would yell at me. Meanwhile, my grandma kept calling and left 3 angry messages for my parents. At 12 a.m., Joe and my mom finally showed up in their car, completely blacked out drunk and giggling like teenagers. They reeked of alcohol, and we were shocked that they had even managed to drive here without getting caught. Joe went to pick up Brad, while my mother asked me to gather my things so we could drive back. However, my grandma put her foot down. She yelled at them for showing up this late and also being so drunk, which was dangerous for all of us. She told Joe that she could not let him take his son in this state and that we should call an Uber for us and leave the car at her place. However, Joe started fighting with my grandma, telling her to mind her own business and how he was the father, so he knew what was best for his son. Tensions escalated quickly with heated exchanges of curses between my grandma and Joe. My mom stood by saying nothing, clearly drunk out of her mind and unable to process things. I could feel the tension rising, so I pleaded for them to stop, reminding them they were scaring my brother, but my words fell on deaf ears. The yelling persisted, and Joe started throwing insults at my grandma and me, saying how he never liked us but tolerated us for the sake of my mother. This made my grandma more pissed, and in a fit of frustration, she threatened to call the police. Hearing this, Joe, who was clearly drunk and yelling like a maniac, did the worst thing that I ever seen anyone do. He slapped my grandma. I screamed in horror as Joe's hand connected with my grandma's face, the sound echoing through the room. "Stop it! Just stop!" I yelled, but Joe did not even glance at me while Brad started to cry, clearly traumatized. My grandma, holding her cheek, yelled for me to call the police, as my mother watched in horror. I don't even remember what I told the 911 operator, as I was crying too much. Fortunately, the person understood and stayed with me on call until the police arrived. When Joe noticed the approaching sirens, panic crossed his face. Suddenly, he started to beg my grandma, pleading with desperation in his eyes. He begged her not to press charges, insisting it would ruin his life and my mom's life. In the end, Joe was charged with assault and taken away in handcuffs. He kept pleading with my mom to help bail him out, but my mom, who had stood frozen earlier, started to cry and yell at him. My grandma made it clear to my mom that if she did not divorce that guy, she would involve the CPS also, and she would lose both her children. My mother simply nodded, clearly looking terrified. It was only later that I found out that Joe and my mom had also tried drugs that night, along with alcohol. The reason she escaped not getting arrested that night is because she was mostly silent, unlike Joe. That night, I and Brad stayed at my grandma's place because I refused to be with her alone, as I was so disappointed and traumatized. Thankfully, the next day when my mother came to her senses, she realized just what her husband had done. She filed for divorce and forbade him from ever seeing us. When the rest of the family found out about what Joe had done, they all came down on my mom, and rightfully so. Everyone had questions, and rightly so. Why did it take so long for my mom to take action? Why didn't she see the signs earlier? My aunt and uncle yelled at my mom until she started to cry. They were so pissed that they vowed to never speak to her ever again for what her husband had done. As per Joe's charges, since he was a first-time offender, the court imposed him with probation. During this period, Joe had to attend counseling and was ordered to stay away from us. He could only see his son if my mother allowed, and she was present as well. He did try to beg my mother for forgiveness, but my mother didn't listen and divorced his manipulative ass. She got a lot from him in the settlement and has since been living a good life. I did not want to stay with my mom after the Joe incident, so I moved all my things to my grandma's place, while Brad stayed with my mom. My mom didn't like this arrangement one bit, since she depended on me to babysit my brother, but she could not say anything to me for fear that my grandma would chew her off. This year, I celebrated my 18th birthday. I was so excited to finally be an adult and start a new phase of my life. However, life had other plans for me. My grandma passed away just a week after my birthday. She had a heart attack, and it was completely unexpected since she did not have any heart problem. After her funeral, the whole family was in shock. She had drawn up a will to divide her assets. For my mom and aunt, she had equally divided up her family heirlooms and jewelry, which were quite expensive. For her oldest son, my uncle, she had left him her car, which he had always loved. For my cousins, she had divided her money to be put in for their college trust funds. For me, she had left her most important asset, her house. Apparently, because I was the closest to my grandma among all and had been living with her, she did not want me to go back home to my mom ever again. I was shocked and started to cry tears of joy as her house meant a lot of happy memories for me. Unfortunately, my grandma didn't leave Brad with anything. I don't know if she simply forgot, or maybe it was because Brad was just my half-brother. Needless to say, my mom was livid with my grandma's will. She flat out said that giving me a house was worth so much more than her jewelry, and it simply wasn't fair for her mother to leave me so much. No one else except my mother had any complaint, since they all understood that my grandma had left us with things that we all deserved. My mother then got angry that Brad did not get anything and started to badmouth my grandma, saying how she was such a selfish woman for not doing anything for her son. I got pissed and told her that she should be grateful that her mother decided to leave her anything at all after what her ex-husband did to her. Hearing this, my mother got pissed, saying how I had no right to bring up the past, which just made me scoff at her. Then, she started to tell me how I should sell Grandma's place and move in with her. I told her that I genuinely loved staying at the house and would never sell it since it meant more to me than money. My mother did try to urge me more, but I stood my ground. I have to say that it has been wonderful living on my own. I have always been surrounded by toxic people until I moved to my grandma's place permanently, and I have also never lived alone. However, I have been spending a lot of time with myself and going to therapy to deal with my grandma's death. With everything going on in my life, I decided to take a gap year. However, because I am no more a minor, I wanted to remove my mother from my trust fund. I needed her signature to access the funds and also to remove her from the beneficiaries. So I went to talk to my mother 2 months ago. She introduced me to her new boyfriend, Robin, who she had been seeing for weeks. Robin seemed like a pleasant guy, however, quite younger than her, unlike all her previous ex-husbands. However, I knew better than to bring his age up, so I asked my mom to talk privately, and she agreed. I expected things to go smoothly with her regarding my trust fund, since this was rightfully the money that my dad had left for me. However, my mother started to freak out when she heard that I wanted to remove her from the trust. I found this odd and told her how this was always the plan anyway, and now that I am 18, I would like to handle my own finances. She refused and told me that I was still young, and because I was anyway not going to college this year, I didn't need to remove her. Her behavior was starting to make me suspicious, but my mother kept insisting that I could always come to her when I started college later. I spent some time with Brad and left. It was only when I was driving back home that I realized that there was a chance that my mother could have been using my money from the funds. Even though it seemed far-fetched at that time, I decided to consult a lawyer who could help me figure out the terms and conditions of the trust document. The lawyer reviewed and agreed that my mother needed to sign off for me to access the funds. However, I could view its current value if needed. This is how I found out from the bank what my mother had been doing. Not only had my mother been withdrawing money from the trust fund in small amounts over the years, but after our recent conversation, she had completely wiped the account clean. I was horrified. Felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath me. The betrayal hit hard, leaving me grappling with a sense of betrayal and disbelief. I felt so pissed about what my mother had done. For days, I was crying and moping around the house, unable to understand why my mother would do something like this. No wonder she did not want me to remove her from having access to my funds. I knew if I confronted her about it, she would just deny it or come up with a lame excuse. I felt like I needed to teach her a lesson. Just as luck would have it, my mom, who was oblivious that I knew about her backstabbing, called to let me know that she was getting married yet again. She was excitedly talking about how Robin was definitely the one, which almost made me roll my eyes, as this was the same I had heard from her with every guy. She told me how she was going to have a grand wedding to celebrate her love with Robin. I just wanted to yell and scream at her for being such a trashy parent and stealing my money, but I kept my mouth shut, as I wanted to take my revenge. Since she was having a wedding, it gave me the perfect opportunity to come up with a plan. I decided to have a family meeting so I could rally all my cousins and trusted relatives for what I was about to do. I told them everything and showed them documents about how my mother had been withdrawing money from my college trust fund that had all the money that my dad had left behind for me, and how she had wiped it clean when she knew that she would have no more access to it. As I shared the extent of her betrayal, the family's shock and disbelief mirrored my own when I first learned the truth. I told them how the timing of her wedding seemed off and she had probably withdrawn so much for her lavish wedding, and I wanted to humiliate her at this event before getting her arrested. My aunt and uncle were horrified that my mother could stoop so low and promised me that they would have my back. My cousins also agreed with my plan. My mother's wedding was last week. She had invited the entire family to her church wedding and grand reception with Robin. I decided to go to the wedding wearing a t-shirt that had the word, "My mother's a gold digger," in bright red letters. I got this shirt custom-made just for this occasion. Seeing my outfit, Robin and his family looked shocked, while I just politely smiled and went to find my seat. My side of the family already knew about my plan, so they were ready. When my mother, oblivious to my plans, began her walk down the aisle, I remained seated. She did not even glance at me as she walked past, so my plan seemed to be working. During the ceremony, when the priest asked if anyone objected to the union of the couple, I knew this was my moment. I raised my hand in objection. The priest looked taken aback. However, along with me, my aunt, uncle, and my cousins also raised their hands. My mother and Robin looked at us in horror as I rose from my seat. My mother finally realized the words on my t-shirt, and her face turned red in embarrassment in front of the assembled guests. I publicly accused my mother of stealing money from my college trust fund, holding up documents. I exposed the details of her betrayal, emphasizing that she had stolen my hard-earned funds, leaving me without the means for college. Her face drained of color as whispers spread among the guests. I then asked her loudly, why would she steal money from her own daughter when she had been married 3 times already and had received more than enough alimony in her previous 2 marriages? The room filled with gasps as Robin turned to my mother, clearly unaware of her actions. He asked her what I meant by 3 marriages when she had only told him about 1 marriage. My mother glared at me in anger and started to yell at me about how childish I was and that she had not stolen any of my money, since she had every right to the money, as she had been married to my father, and told me how I should be grateful to her that I was ever born. I yelled back at her that what she had done was illegal and that I was going to make sure she got arrested. However, my mom scoffed and told me how ungrateful I was, insisting it wasn't a big deal since she had practically raised me, and the least I could do was let her have the money. She argued that, as my mother, she had every right to my money. That's when Robin chimed in. He asked my mother if this was why they had managed to afford such an extravagant wedding, since my mother was footing the bill for everything. My mother kept quiet, which was basically her admitting to it. This is when all hell broke loose. I couldn't contain my anger and began yelling at her. The chaos escalated as my relatives joined in, expressing their outrage at my mom's despicable actions. Amidst the shouting, my mom retaliated, insisting it was a private matter between me and her, and how they should not judge her for it. Things got physical when my aunt got too close while confronting her, leading to shoving between them. The chaos reached its peak, prompting someone to call the police. Eventually, my mom was arrested since she kept shouting and yelling when the police arrived and refused to settle down. I went to the police station with my aunt to give my statement. Since then, my mother has been charged with embezzlement and financial fraud. I can't believe this, even when I am writing it, because I never thought I would get my mother arrested. I can't believe she would do such a thing to me. Since her wedding, I've been receiving calls from everyone, both out of concern and also indignation. Some of my distant relatives do think that I took things too far and that I should have never involved others in this matter or got my mom arrested. My side of the family believes that I did the right thing. However, this is such an extraordinary circumstance that I am forced to ask if I did go too far with my mom. Update 1. Thank you everyone for your kind words. When I posted this, I was overthinking, and I felt really guilty since I have never really hated my mom, or at least I didn't until she pulled the stunt. I never wanted to file a case against her, and it still feels like I'm having a bad dream. However, I do understand that this is all the consequences of her own actions. To everyone who is worried about me, please don't worry, because my uncle has helped me find a good lawyer who is confident that we will win this legal suit against my mom. My only goal is to recover my lost money, or at least as much as I can. Also, for anyone wondering about Brad, he is doing okay. He is still too young to understand what is happening. He is currently staying with Joe and his family since my mom's arrest. Update 2. It's been 6 months since my last update. I know a lot of you have been wondering about what happened, and I would like to clarify that I was not allowed to talk or write anything about the case since the legal proceedings were going on. In short, the court ruled in favor of me. My mother has been asked to pay back every penny of the money that she had stolen from me. She cried and begged, but the judge didn't budge. She now has to liquidate all her assets and probably also sell her house in order to pay me. It feels so good to write this since these last few months have been brutal on my mental health. The only thing that has kept me going is thinking of my grandma and dad. My grandma would have been proud that I stood up to my mom, and my dad would have wanted me to have his money so I could invest in my future. Update 3. It's been 3 months since I last updated here. How was everyone's New Year's? Mine was fantastic. My mother, facing the weight of her actions, has repaid the entire amount she had embezzled from my college trust fund. The legal proceedings compelled her to make amends, at least financially. I also made the difficult decision to sever ties with my mother permanently. The rest of my family echoed this sentiment, and we collectively decided to distance ourselves from her, despite her trying to reach out to us as if she expected us to just forgive and forget this incident. Lately, I have been checking out brochures and thinking about what's next in 2024. The gap year has turned out to be amazing overall, despite the legal proceedings. It has been a mix of figuring myself out and healing myself from the past trauma. Spending time with my cousins and other family members has always been a big part of moving forward. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My sister accused me of not helping out financially for her wedding, but then I found out about this elaborate scam. Her fiancé's decision shocked everyone. I, 28F, have an older sister named Jane, 32F. We grew up in a middle-class family, and our parents always tried to treat us equally. They paid for our college education and helped us start our careers. After college, I got a job in marketing while Jane became a teacher. 5 years ago, I took a big risk and started my own business. It was really tough at first, with long hours and a lot of stress. There were times when I wondered if I'd made a mistake, but I kept pushing forward. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. Now, my business is doing well and I'm making good money. Jane has continued working as a teacher all this time. She makes less than I do, but she really loves her job and finds it fulfilling. Looking back, I can see that even though our parents tried to be fair, there were times when Jane seemed to be the favorite. When we were kids, Jane always got to choose the movie on family movie nights. If we both wanted the same toy, Jane usually got it. Mom would often say things like, "Let your sister have it, she's older." It wasn't a huge deal, but those little things added up over time. Last year, Jane got engaged to her boyfriend, Tom. They started planning a big wedding for this summer. Jane asked me to be her maid of honor, which made me really happy. I said yes right away, excited to be part of her special day. About a month ago, Jane came over to my house. She said she needed to talk about something important. We sat down in my living room, and she started telling me all about her wedding plans. Everything sounded really nice. The venue, the flowers, the music. Then, out of nowhere, she asked me for money. She wanted me to pay for half of her entire wedding. I was completely shocked. Jane explained that since I make more money than her, she thought I should help pay for the wedding. She said it wasn't fair that I had so much while she struggled to make ends meet. I tried to explain that I couldn't afford to pay for half her wedding. Yes, my business makes money, but I put most of it back into the company to help it grow. Plus, I have a mortgage and other bills to pay. Jane got really angry when I said no. She called me selfish and said I didn't care about her happiness. I tried to explain my situation better, but she wouldn't listen. She just got up and left, slamming the door on her way out. The next day, my mom called me. Jane had told her what happened, and Mom wanted to know why I wouldn't help my sister. I explained my financial situation to her, just like I had to Jane. Mom seemed to understand, but she still thought I should give Jane some money for the wedding. I told her I'd think about it, but honestly, I felt frustrated. It reminded me of all those times growing up when Mom had sided with Jane. After thinking it over for a week, I called Jane. I offered to pay for her wedding dress as a gift. I thought this was a good compromise. It was a significant contribution, but something I could actually afford. But Jane refused. She said it wasn't enough and that I should pay for more. I told her the dress was all I could afford, and Jane hung up on me. After that phone call, things got really bad. Jane started telling our family and friends that I was greedy. She said I cared more about money than family. Some people believed her without even asking for my side of the story. My cousins stopped talking to me altogether. My aunt called to tell me I was being selfish. I felt terrible about the whole situation, but I didn't think I was wrong. I had worked really hard for my money. I couldn't afford to pay for half of Jane's wedding, and I didn't think it was fair for her to expect that from me. I thought offering to buy her dress was pretty generous considering my financial situation. Last week, my parents had a big family dinner. Jane and Tom were there, along with our grandparents and some aunts and uncles. During dinner, Jane made an announcement that she and Tom were postponing their wedding. She said they couldn't afford it because I had refused to help. Everyone at the table turned to look at me. I felt awful, like I was being put on the spot. My grandmother asked why I wouldn't help my sister. Before I could even try to explain, Jane started crying. She said she had always dreamed of having a big wedding, but now she couldn't have one because of me. I tried to explain my side of things, but no one seemed interested in listening. My uncle said I should be ashamed of myself. My grandfather said that family should always help family. Even my dad, who usually stays out of arguments, said I should reconsider my decision. The whole thing reminded me of when we were kids and everyone would take Jane's side in our arguments. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left the dinner early. I felt like everyone was against me, like I was the bad guy in this situation. When I got home, I broke down and cried. I didn't know what to do or how to fix this mess. The next day, I got an unexpected call from Tom, Jane's fiancé. He apologized for all the drama at the family dinner. He explained that Jane had been really stressed about the wedding costs. Tom told me that they could actually afford the wedding without my help. They just needed to cut back on some of the more extravagant plans. He said Jane had gotten carried away with her plans and had expected too much from me. I felt relieved after talking to Tom. I thought maybe things would start to get better now that the truth was out. But then Jane posted on Facebook about her postponed wedding. She didn't mention me by name, but she hinted that a family member had let her down. Many people commented saying how sorry they were. Some asked who had disappointed her. Jane didn't answer directly, but our cousin commented that I was the one who had refused to help. Now, many of my friends and family members are angry with me. They keep sending me messages telling me I should help Jane. Some say I'm not a good sister. Others call me greedy. A few have even threatened to cut me out of their lives if I don't help Jane with the wedding. It's also overwhelming and hurtful. I feel incredibly stressed and confused by this whole situation. I don't think I did anything wrong, but so many people are angry with me. Sometimes I wonder if maybe I should have done more to help Jane. But the reality is, I really can't afford to pay for half her wedding, and I think it's unfair of her to expect that from me, especially without even discussing it first. This situation has brought up a lot of old feelings from our childhood. I remember how Mom would often take Jane's side in arguments, or how Jane would get her way more often than I did. I love my sister, but it feels like she's always expected me to give in to her wishes, just like when we were kids. Yesterday, my best friend suggested I post online for advice. She thinks an outside perspective might help me see things more clearly. I'm not sure what to do next. I want to repair my relationship with Jane and my family, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of. I worked hard to build my business and create financial stability for myself. I don't think it's right for Jane to expect me to jeopardize that for her wedding. I keep thinking about all the times in the past when I've helped Jane out. When she was struggling to pay rent during her first year of teaching, I lent her money. When her car broke down last year, I drove her to work for 2 weeks until she could get it fixed. I've always tried to be there for her, but it never seems to be enough. This whole situation has made me question a lot of things about my family relationships. I love my family, but I feel like they don't understand or respect my position. They see that my business is doing well and assume I have unlimited funds to share. They don't see the long hours, the stress, and the financial risks I've taken to get where I am. I'm also hurt that Jane would air our private business on social media. It feels like she's trying to manipulate me by turning others against me. I thought we were closer than that. I thought she would understand my position if I explained it to her. But instead, she's chosen to paint me as the villain in this story. I keep wondering if there's something I'm missing. Am I really being selfish? Should I be doing more to help Jane, even if it means putting my own financial stability at risk? Or am I right to stand my ground and protect what I've worked so hard to build? I'm hoping that by sharing my story, I might get some outside perspectives. Maybe someone else has been in a similar situation and can offer advice. Or maybe just writing it all out will help me see things more clearly. Right now, I feel stuck between my love for my family and my need to protect myself and my business. I don't know how to move forward from here. Update. After posting my story online, I received a lot of supportive messages and advice. Many people suggested I stand my ground and not give in to Jane's demands. They helped me see that I wasn't being selfish by protecting my financial stability. A few days after I posted, I got an unexpected call from my cousin, Emma. Emma and I were close when we were younger, but we drifted apart over the years. She said she had seen my post and wanted to talk to me about Jane. Emma told me something that shocked me. She said that Jane had approached her about the wedding too. Jane had asked Emma to contribute a large sum of money, claiming that she and Tom were struggling financially. Emma, who works as a nurse and isn't particularly wealthy, felt pressured but eventually agreed to give Jane some money. But that wasn't all. Emma had recently found out that Jane had been asking several other family members and friends for money too. She wasn't just asking for small contributions. She was asking for thousands of dollars from each person. Emma estimated that if everyone Jane asked had agreed, She would have collected enough to pay for the entire wedding twice over. I was stunned. I couldn't believe Jane would do something like this. It seemed so manipulative and greedy. Emma said she felt used and was planning to confront Jane about it. She wanted to let me know first because she thought I deserved to know the truth. After talking to Emma, I did some digging of my own. I reached out to a few other family members and close friends. To my surprise, many of them had similar stories. Jane had approached them all separately, telling each one a sob story about how she couldn't afford her dream wedding. She had sworn each person to secrecy, claiming she was embarrassed about needing help. One of our aunts told me that Jane had even implied that I had promised to pay for half the wedding but had backed out at the last minute. This explained why so many people had been angry with me. Jane had been spinning a web of lies, making herself look like a victim and me like the villain. I felt hurt, angry, and betrayed. This wasn't just about money anymore. Jane had been actively trying to turn our family and friends against me. She had lied and manipulated people, all to fund an extravagant wedding she clearly couldn't afford. I spent a few days processing this information. I was torn about what to do. Part of me wanted to confront Jane immediately and expose her lies to everyone, but another part of me worried about the fallout. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and I didn't want to destroy our relationship completely. After much thought, I decided to talk to Tom first. He had seemed reasonable when he called me before, and I thought he deserved to know what his fiancée was doing. I invited him over to my house to talk. When Tom arrived, I could tell he was uncomfortable. He probably thought I was going to try to defend myself again about not contributing to the wedding. But as I started to explain what I had learned, his expression changed from discomfort to shock, then to anger. I told Tom everything about Emma's call, the other family members' stories, and Jane's lies about me. I showed him messages from relatives confirming their stories. Tom sat in silence for a long time after I finished talking. Finally, Tom spoke. He told me he had no idea Jane was doing this. He said they had discussed their wedding budget, and while it was tight, they could afford the wedding they had planned. He couldn't understand why Jane would be asking people for so much money. Tom then shared something that made the situation even more confusing. He said that Jane had told him that her parents were paying for most of the wedding, and that's why they could afford such a big celebration. This was news to me. Our parents hadn't mentioned anything about this, and I knew they weren't in a financial position to fund a lavish wedding. As we talked more, Tom began to open up about other issues in his relationship with Jane. He said she had a habit of exaggerating or lying about things, especially when it came to money. He had always brushed it off as harmless, but now he was seeing a pattern. Tom left my house that day looking troubled. He thanked me for being honest with him and said he had a lot to think about. I felt relieved to have told him the truth, but also worried about what would happen next. A week passed, and I didn't hear anything from either Tom or Jane. Then, late one night, I got a text from Tom. It was brief. He said he had confronted Jane about everything I had told him, and things had not gone well. He said he needed some time to think and would be in touch. 3 days later, Tom called me. His voice sounded tired and sad. He told me that after a lot of soul-searching and several difficult conversations with Jane, he had decided to call off the wedding. He said Jane had admitted to asking people for money but had tried to justify it, saying she just wanted a perfect wedding. She didn't seem to understand how her actions had hurt people. Tom said he had realized that Jane's behavior around the wedding was part of a larger pattern of dishonesty and manipulation. He told me about other instances where she had lied or exaggerated things, often to get her way or to avoid taking responsibility for her actions. He said he couldn't marry someone he couldn't trust. I felt a mix of emotions hearing this. Part of me was sad for Tom and for the end of their relationship. Another part felt vindicated. Finally, someone else was seeing the side of Jane that I had glimpsed. And, if I'm being honest, a small part of me felt relieved that the wedding drama was over. Tom asked me not to say anything to Jane or the rest of the family. He wanted to be the one to break the news. I agreed, thanking him for his honesty and wishing him well. The next day, all hell broke loose. Jane called me, sobbing and furious. She accused me of ruining her life and destroying her relationship. She said I had turned Tom against her out of jealousy and spite. I tried to stay calm and explained that I had only told Tom the truth, but Jane wouldn't listen. She hung up on me, still crying. Over the next few weeks, the story came out in bits and pieces. Jane told our parents and some of our relatives that Tom had broken up with her because of me, but she was vague on the details. Tom, true to his word, told people that he and Jane had realized they weren't compatible and had decided to end things. Some family members, especially those Jane had asked for money, started to put the pieces together. A few reached out to me to apologize for how they had treated me earlier. Others seemed unsure what to believe and kept their distance from both me and Jane. Our parents were devastated. They had been looking forward to the wedding and were shocked by the sudden breakup. Mom, in particular, seemed lost. She kept trying to get Jane and Tom back together, not understanding the full story. As for Jane, she alternated between anger and despair. Some days she would call me, crying and apologizing, saying she didn't know why she had done what she did. Other days, she would send me angry texts, blaming me for everything. I tried to maintain boundaries, responding calmly when I did respond, but it was emotionally exhausting. About a month after the wedding was called off, I got a surprising call from our dad. He asked if we could meet for coffee. When we met, he looked tired and older than I remembered. He told me that he and Mom had finally gotten the full story from Tom. He apologized for not believing me earlier and for the way the family had treated me. Dad also shared that this incident had opened his eyes to some of Jane's behavior patterns. He admitted that perhaps they had been too lenient with her over the years, always taking her side and making excuses for her actions. He said he and Mom were encouraging Jane to seek therapy to deal with her issues around honesty and money. As the dust began to settle, I found myself reflecting on the whole experience. It had been painful and stressful, but it had also brought some long-standing family dynamics to light. I hope that maybe, in the long run, this would lead to healthier relationships within our family. Jane and I are still not on speaking terms. I'm not sure if or when our relationship will recover, but I feel more at peace with my decisions. I know I did the right thing by standing my ground and telling the truth, even though it led to difficult consequences. This experience taught me a lot about setting boundaries, standing up for myself, and the importance of honesty in relationships. It wasn't easy, and the aftermath is still ongoing, but I believe it was necessary. I'm hopeful that with time, therapy, and effort, my family can heal from this and become stronger. But I also know that it will take work from all of us, especially Jane, for that to happen. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My girlfriend was secretly seeing her therapist behind my back and faking mental illness for attention. I, 27M, have been in a relationship with my GF for 2 years. I'll call her Emma to protect her privacy. I met her at my friend's birthday and instantly got attracted to her. She was incredibly beautiful, but it was her boldness and smartness that got me attracted to her. She had a very interesting personality, and it still amazes me how she was the one who made the move and proposed to me. Our relationship was just like everybody else's, with the same bittersweet moments, and we had fun together. Apart from her fun nature, what intrigued me about her was that she was a strong woman. I mean, she grew up in a very harsh and abusive household. Her parents were almost non-existent. Her father was an addict and even used to hit her and her siblings when drunk. Her mother was too busy and tired with her work to check on her children. Since Emma was the eldest one, she became the motherly figure for her younger siblings. She grew up before her age. When she was in her early teens, she ran away with her younger siblings to a church shelter house where she completed her school in a community school. She later joined an NGO as a social work worker for children's welfare and was still working there when I met her. I was struck by her life. The time we had together was good until she started shutting herself off from me. I mean, it wasn't sudden. She had always been flaky, but after a while, she became very unpredictable. She didn't respond to my text for 2 straight days, and then I had to show up at her place to see what was wrong. She gave some lame excuse and got away with it. When this happened a few times, I confronted her. She has to tell me what's wrong or else our relationship is not moving anywhere. That's when she told me her whole story about her severe anxiety and depression issues. She said she has been suffering from acute depression ever since she was a teen, and with time it was getting severe. I felt so bad for her and urged her to shift to my place. I never sensed that she was going through such a trauma. I thought she was putting up a brave face. I still remember how she got extreme panic attacks in the middle of the night after moving to my place. I had spent nights calming her down and helping her come out of it. I did everything I could to keep her happy, and her panic attacks stopped, but she still suffered from depression. I asked her to see a therapist. She was reluctant. She said she had seen one a few years back, but it didn't work and it cost her a lot. I looked up for a trusted therapist and stumbled upon my roommate's profile. He was a certified therapist. I called him up asking for help. I explained Emma's situation and offered to provide Emma with the latest slot. She was hesitant to go, saying that it would be expensive and a burden on me, but I asked her to focus on her healing at the moment and not think about money. Her therapy started, but I could not see any progress even after 3 months. I asked my therapist friend, let's call him Alex, about it, and he said mental healing takes time. He asked me to be patient with her, and I was. But with time, our dynamic started changing. She stopped discussing her problems with me. She reached out to Alex for everything. Everything means literally everything, even if it was our relationship. Instead of talking this out with me, she discussed that with Alex. I understand he was her therapist, but anything that involved me should be discussed with me so that we could solve it together. I was still putting up all this initially, but when they started meeting each other off therapy sessions and became friends, my insecurity crept in. I kind of felt like a third person in my own relationship. It was not always. When they asked me to join them, but once I showed up with them for dinner, they both were so immersed in each other as if I was invisible. I was frustrated, but she looked happy, and I thought maybe I was overreacting to it all, and she was just trying to heal herself. Once I woke up in the middle of the night to find Emma crying and talking to someone in the living room. I immediately understood it was Alex. I felt so bad, as if my presence was not worthy of her. I was beside her, yet she chose to call Alex in the middle of the night to share her thoughts. When she came back to the bed, she saw that I was awake. I couldn't hold it back and asked her what was wrong, and she told me it was just an anxiety attack. I asked her why she didn't inform me. She told me she didn't want to be a burden on me, and talking to Alex helped her better than talking to me. He gave her professional help. I couldn't sleep after hearing that. I could hold back my insecurity because she looked so relaxed and happier with him, but she stayed silent around me. The next day, I told her I felt like non-existent in her life because she didn't share anything with me. I also confronted her that meeting Alex after therapy was not ethical. I tried to be subtle in my approach so as not to trigger her. I said Alex was my friend and was kind to lend his time at odd hours, but we shouldn't exploit it. She got defensive at this and asked me whether I wanted her to heal or not. She called me a control freak and said I doubted her unnecessarily. After a few minutes, she started hyperventilating, and I got scared. I tried to pacify her, and she shrugged me off, saying not to touch her, else she would kill herself. I seriously got very scared. I left the room and slept in the living room. In the morning, she said she wanted a break and focus on healing and went back to her place. I slept near us nights with constant fear in my heart that if I ever said anything like that to her again, she would do something horrible, so I decided to keep my thoughts to myself and not overthink the whole situation. I gave her the time she needed to heal. It was more than a month since she had moved out, and I went to Alex to ask him about her progress. When I reached there, I saw him driving off from his clinic with Emma. I felt bitterness in my mouth as they drove off. I felt very suspicious. I called Emma, but she didn't respond to my call. Instead, I got a text from her saying that she couldn't call right now because she was in the church. She lied to me about her meeting with him. I decided to stop being delusional and finally confront her about this. I visited her place. I asked her up front where was she on the last day, and she said the same thing again. I told her I saw her driving off with Alex. She twisted it, saying Alex was going in the same direction. He offered to drop her to the church. Even before I could say anything, she started threatening me emotionally. Her behavior made me anxious and felt like a jerk for tolerating her. Having anxiety or depression doesn't give you the right to let the other person go through the same trauma. She wasn't trying to protect her peace at this point. She was just avoiding confrontation, and whenever I tried asking her anything, she would just play her victim card and shut me up. I didn't know what to do, so I let her have a break. She almost ghosted me. I again went to meet Alex. I asked him about Emma's progress, and he told me she was doing better than before. I sensed he was cold towards me, as if he wasn't interested in meeting me. His phone started buzzing with M flashing on the screen. He excused himself and went inside. I called Emma, and her phone was busy too. I knew she was on the call with Alex. I was done with a relationship and went for a head-on confrontation with Emma. I told her that their closeness was bothering me a lot. She listened to me quietly at first and then started bashing me, saying that I was jealous, that I failed as a boyfriend and didn't provide her with comfort, and now that Alex was helping her, I had problems with it. She stood up and started crying like a maniac and told me that if I started to blame her again, she would cut off her wrist and kill herself. I got really scared and tried to calm her down, but she just didn't want to listen to me and asked me to leave. Before going back, I told her that she was just trying to hide behind her problems and that was not a good thing to do. After leaving her apartment, I literally cried like anything. My anxiety was bottling up inside and I needed to explode. I called my close friend James and told him the whole thing that happened, and I asked him for his advice. He said that she was literally hiding behind her problems and I should just let her do her thing for a while. Actually, James referred me to this space to vent out and connect with like-minded people. Looking forward to connecting if anyone has any suggestions. My condition is quite sensitive, and I want to be careful in handling Emma. Update 1. Hello everyone. It's been a while since my last update, as I was going through a rough time with Emma and had anxiety throughout the whole break thing. I listened to James and left Emma on her own for a while, before she tried to reach me on her own. After a while she texted me and asked me if she could come over. I agreed. She came with flowers and hugged me. She looked extremely happy and better. We talked, and she told me about everything that happened on these days and apologized to me for her behavior. I asked her if she was still seeing Alex, and she said that her sessions got shorter and now it's 1 day a week and that she was on medic. I was happy to hear that she was in her healing era. Felt great after a long time. She was soundly asleep, and her phone was continuously buzzing around 2 in the night. It raised my curiosity, and I checked her phone and tried to unlock it, but she had changed her password. I left it as it was and went to sleep. The next morning, I dropped her off at her NGO, and I left for the office. During the day, I asked her if she wanted me to pick her up from work. She said she was super busy with work and she would come home a little late or she might stay at her place. I went back to my place, and after a while, I tried calling her, but she didn't respond and didn't even respond to any of my texts. I waited till midnight and still received no response, so I slept. My messages were still unread until the morning. It scared me to think if she was fine. On the way to my office, I went to her place to see if everything was all right, but the apartment was locked. I called her, and she didn't respond, so I called her friend Sophie to see if she was with her, but she told me she wasn't and she left the office quite early yesterday. I freaked out. I didn't know what to do or whom to ask, so I headed to work. I was tired of her flakiness, showering love one moment and then ignoring me in another. I was so drained, and I just wanted to talk to her and ask her what she really wanted from me and from this relationship, but her past reactions had left me traumatized. Neither I was able to leave the relationship, nor I was able to fix it. After several hours, she finally called me, and through her voice, she looked pretty fine. I asked her where was she. She told me that she was busy with the new NGOs project for child education, and she stayed with her friend Sophie the whole night. That's why she couldn't call me back. I stayed silent, and my heart was pounding pretty badly at her lies. I knew there was something going on, and instead of acting like a fool, it was my time to act. I told her that I wanted to meet her, so either she should come over or I'll come. She told me that she was really tired and asked me to come over after finishing off the work. I went to her place. She looked really exhausted and hugged me tightly. While hugging her, I saw a red mark on her neck which looked like a hickey, and I asked her where she got that. She told me that she burned herself from the straightener last night. She thought I would believe her, but I didn't, because it was nothing like a burn but something else. The entire time we had dinner, she was continuously texting someone. I asked her to keep her phone down at least when we were eating. She told me that it was just a friend and put her phone away. She was on medication and got into a deep sleep. I took her phone and used her fingerprint to unlock it. My hands were shivering while opening her chats. I saw an archive chat and there were many groups and texts from the website. I almost came to the home screen, but then something caught my eye, and it was no one other than Alex. I opened the text and couldn't believe my eyes. I scrolled back to the first text and started reading it with teary eyes. At first, it was just a patient and therapist chat, but then it turned into a flirt and an emotional connection. She shared every emotional thing with him, and soon they were confessing their love for each other. As per the initial conversation, it was only an emotional connection, and they didn't have a physical relationship. I was shocked to see that eventually she started faking her problems to gain his sympathy. I couldn't believe she was such an imposter and that she would do something like that. She told him that she needed him very badly and that I was physically and mentally abusing her. Their emotional conversations turned into sexting, and then they discussed having sex. I sat there shivering and felt chills down my body. She also told him that she had broken up with me. Alex also mentioned to her about my visit and told her that he hadn't informed me about anything. Someone with such anxiety and depression was capable of such actions, which was new to me. I was trying to help her, and in return, she ruined me. I checked the gallery and saw their pictures of the dates they went on together. As I was about to get up, her medicine box fell off the table, and Olive got scattered. I was picking them up when I found something suspicious. It was this one pill that had MYFF-ione. The logo on the medicine indicated something related to periods. I checked it on Google and found it was an abortion pill. I couldn't take anything further and silently left her without saying as she called me in the morning, but I didn't respond, neither on planning to respond to her any longer. I'm just done being the good guy. Update 2. Finally, Emma left my life, but she left things with me for a lifetime, and that was her anxiety, depression, and panic attacks. I realized that in the process of helping her heal, I got anxious. Anyway, after finding out the truth, I left her immediately and didn't talk to her at all. I ignored her completely because I didn't have the courage to confront her. I went back to my parents' house and took leave for a few days. I shared everything with my mother, and my physical and mental health both collapsed miserably. My mom advised me to seek closure from her and let everything out because bottling up would do more damage. I was confused, but then I decided to meet Alex first. I asked him what was going on between them. He was confused, and then I showed him my prescription that I was diagnosed with depression and I really do need him to tell me everything. I told him I knew all the truth, so there was no point in hiding it anymore. He told me how it started, and he believed that I really abused her because of my anger issues that he had seen back in college. I explained to him that I never touched her without her permission and abusing her was off the charts. My anger issues never surfaced when I handled her, and I never expected that he would betray me like that. I told him that I referred my girlfriend to him because I trusted him with her condition, but I never thought that you both would me and make me sick. I asked him not to mention anything about this to her as I still haven't confronted her. He told me that he wouldn't see her ever again after I showed him the evidence of her double dating. He also told me that she didn't need serious help because whatever she was doing was totally sickening and you couldn't comprehend whether she was seriously ill or doing it for attention. Her manic episodes were so scary that no one could ever doubt that she was faking it, but I think Alex was right. I think she told me the whole story for attention and did the same with him too. She was even reluctant to seek therapy, and when I urged her to see one, she trapped him too. After I was done talking to Alex, I headed to Emma's place. As soon as she saw me, she hugged me and cried profusely. She started kissing me all over my face, asking me why I was ignoring her. She was crying and panicking as if she was about to faint. I realized this was how she always emotionally manipulated me. I shrugged her off and asked her to stop acting and confront the truth. She gave me a confused look and asked me what was I talking about. I told her that I knew all the truth so she could cut off her acting skills for a while. She looked at me in disbelief and then started hyperventilating. I sat there while she acted like she was out of breath. She started murmuring that she was having a panic attack. This time, I didn't rush to comfort her. I just sat there and gave her a cold stare. She limped her way to the kitchen trying to fetch water. She was breathing so heavily that I could hear her breath all through the living room. If I had not known her truth, I would have fallen for her acting skill yet again. She brought the glass of water and gulped it all in a shot. Just see her acting. Anyone who is having a panic attack would drink water as soon they find it and not display an act in front of others. She sat on the couch trying to pacify herself and giving me a disgusting look. I asked her whether she was done acting and if there was anything left. She told me to mind my language, then started acting like a maniac and threatened me with her life. I stood up and shouted at her to sit properly and stop all this. I asked her to confess that she did cheat on my back with Alex and that she was double dating. She sat there in shock and nodded and told me that she got emotionally attached to him. I told her that I didn't care about any that she was going to feed me other than the fact that she faked all her anxiety and depression for baseless attention and made a fool out of me. I told her that now Alex also knew everything about her and she was free to go and find another prey to feed her emotions. While I was leaving, she tried to stop me, but I threatened her to never show up in my life ever again. I left the place and never heard from her again, and that was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. It was so horrible the way she emotionally controlled me. I got so deeply connected with her emotionally that I believed all the BS she fed me. As for Alex, he sometimes called to check on me. I am doing a lot better than before, but I have got severe anxiety disorder. I guess it will take time and I will be fine sooner or later. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Discovered that my wife cheated on me while she was having fun with her app and abroad. Now she will face consequences. My wife and 2 kids fled to Europe because of the full-scale war that started in our home country in February 2022. Due to martial law, men are not allowed to cross the border, so I stayed behind. About 5 months later, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer and underwent surgery. I was devastated and depressed. I've been missing my family so much that I went down very quickly. I became broken. I realized that I was losing myself, losing my family, and sought therapy. Things got better, but not for long. In winter 2022, I noticed some changes in my wife's behavior. She became distant and detached. She stopped caring about me, even though I told her directly that I needed her support and care. All my questions about what's going on were met with the assurance that everything was fine, and she was just tired. Fast forward to February 2023, my oncologist told me that I had a chance to make documents which might allow me to cross the border. I was so happy to have at least a small chance to finally visit my family, to kiss my wife, to hug my kids, to take them to the seacoast, to do everything. The closer I got to having my documents ready, the more distant my wife became. No matter what I asked, the response was always that everything was fine, and I had nothing to worry about. Finally, in May 2023, I arrived. My kids were crying and smiling. They were happy, as was my wife, but something was missing. She didn't even cook any dinner. There was just a bunch of dirty dishes and mess around the house. Our first night together, no sex. It was shocking. We hadn't seen each other for almost a year. Those 3 weeks in September 2022 don't count, and there was no desire for intimacy. I tried to initiate something, but she felt tired and wanted to sleep. A week passed and we hardly had sex once. There were no kisses, no holding hands, no hugs. I sat with her and started a conversation at asking if everything was fine between us. And guess what? She said, "Everything is fine, honey. I just waited for so long that I am not so sex addicted anymore. But it's not about you. We are good. I just need some space." My suspicions started to grow exponentially. Yes, we had tough times in our marriage when we were so tired that we had sex only a few times a month, but a year in needing space? A few days later, I noticed some stranger's messages on her phone, but I couldn't see the context as the screen was locked. She told me that this person was one of her new bosses. I was a bit worried, and the next day, found that this new boss liked her photos on social media. I immediately started another conversation about her feelings and who this guy was. She told me that she didn't know what she felt for me and that the guy was just a friend. I was ruined but tried to stay calm. I understood we had been separated by distance for some time. I agreed that it was hard for both of us, so I decided to give her some time and space, even though I wasn't a fan of that decision. So I was nervous all the time, but As I mentioned, decided to take my family to the seacoast and try to relax. We spent a great week together, talking and drinking a lot, having sex, kissing. Everything seemed fine. So here it is. A regular night out with the girls. I felt so worried that night and couldn't sleep. I was thinking about that man and about the fact that my wife had lost her feelings but never communicated that to me while we were in different countries. I opened that person's social media page, and there he was, checked in at the same place where my wife and the other girls were partying. I approached her laptop. We don't have secrets, so I had access via Touch ID. Opened a few messengers and found nudes, sexting, and "I love you" messages with another guy from that so-called boss company. I felt down. My heart was broken. I confronted her that night. She saw in my eyes that I knew it was hard, and I was hurt. Yes, she confessed, but only after I caught her. She thought she had deleted everything. I spent a few more weeks with my kids and her. I was so shocked that I tried to put all the blame on myself, looking for some reasonable explanations. We slept in the same bed, had sex all that time, and I tried to win her back, but she was stone cold. Their affair had been going on for a few months, so while I was getting all the documents, she started a new life behind my back. After I came back to my home country, I started to analyze the situation. I tried to have a conversation with her, but she just asked for more time to figure it out. I suggested going to marriage counseling twice, but she ignored it as if I never said it. It was her choice, her decision to ruin everything. I lost her forever. I lost myself. She betrayed me while I was battling cancer and needed her the most. I am devastated, ruined, feeling like an unworthy, miserable human being. She tried to blame me for her adultery, but I confronted her and told her to shut up. Why didn't she ever talk to me about her feelings? I never saw it coming. I had thought we were finally happy and could relax after chasing our dreams for so many years. If she had ever told me that she was unhappy, I would have done everything to fix it or at least tried, but she was dead silent. I believe things like this don't happen overnight. I just don't understand why she never openly communicated her feelings and needs to me. Last summer, I got a paper letter from her expressing her love and longing, counting the days until we could be together. I go through our text messages every night, and I swear I can't believe it was all lies. Where am I now? I am trying hard to start the healing process, but these texts between her and him are just tattooed in my mind, along with a photo she never sent me, the love word she told him in me every single day of her affair. I can't believe how someone who promised to go through this nightmare together just 6 months ago could betray me so harshly. She won't even try to talk about the reasons why and how it happened. She is not remorseful. I talk to my kids every morning and before they go to bed. I love them so much, and they love me back. I am just so afraid that they may hate me someday for betraying them and ruining our family. I stay strong for myself and for my kids' sake. I am thinking about filing for divorce, but I am not sure I am ready now. Maybe I am just too afraid of the choice I have to make. I still don't understand why my wife didn't divorce me first and is asking me not to rush things. I am completely lost and broken. I don't cry anymore because I feel nothing anymore. Her betrayal hurts as hell, as do thoughts about my cancer, which may return if I surrender. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I've been with my boyfriend for 30 years. He's rich, and I never had to work. He finally proposed and I said no. He kicked me out and now I have to go into the real world. Yesterday, after dinner, my 52F boyfriend of 30 years, 53M, proposed to me. He just walked towards me holding a box and said to open it. It was a ring, and I had pictured this moment a million different times, but never thought I'd be so apathetic. My boyfriend then said that he was reader now and wants to kick back and enjoy life with me, and would love to do it all with me as his wife. A nice speech and all, but from the 5-year mark of our relationship onwards, I had been making clear my deep desire to marry and was consistently dismissed, given empty promises, gaslit. We had been through the gamut with therapy, and one counselor implied that me telling him we needed to go to therapy and getting his butt on the couch still means nothing if his mind has been made up. I was in denial about the fact he was just giving me the false illusion of progress to stall. My boyfriend and I have 4 kids. The oldest 3 are adults, while the youngest is 15F, was sleeping over elsewhere when this all went down. All of our kids went to a private school filled with typical Southern soccer parents. I had to endure PTA mom's jabs about me not sharing a last name with my kids. Preteen years were hell because the other kids would taunt my kids by saying, "Your dad would rather sin and go to hell than marry your mom." My BF's mom would tell him marriage would be selfish on my part. It is just a piece of paper. My BF ended up rising up the ranks until he became an executive. I was AAM, so I felt like there was always a power-IM balance, exasperated by the fact I could be tossed anytime. I partly did stay because I wanted my kids to have the best life and because I felt lucky and proud to be partnered with such an intelligent, successful man, but also because I loved him. These past few years, my boyfriend's career has taken a downturn. He will never be poor, but the company he was part of took a nosedive during 2020, and he had made enemies out of associates, board members. He decided to step back from his role and take the generous severance agreed upon. Now he is living off his investments and wants to relax. I did not like how his career ended and how he treated people, and had been deciding whether I wanted to leave and find somebody else after our youngest turns 18. So the proposal was a shock because I should hope that he noticed I have avoided conversations about the future as of late. He rattles on about downsizing our house so we can travel and also cutting back on our other expenses, but we're not married, so it's all his money house anyway. He did notice my eye roll and was offended. He asked what's wrong, and I said that suddenly now that he's downsizing, I'm good enough to marry? He got mad and said that now that he's downsizing and no longer an executive, I suddenly think our relationship is disrespectful, and started implying I was a gold digger. I was so angry I walked out and said I might just go out looking for a respectful relationship because I don't know what respect is anymore. Update 1. At the time of my original post, my boyfriend and I had not spoken since the engagement fight. I've been with him long enough to know that when he goes and closes the bedroom door before I get in, that's a signal that I should sleep in one of the guest rooms, so I did that. However, this morning I broke the ice. I told him about how dismissed I felt over the years. I also said that we are both in our 50s and these last few years have taught us that people at work who kiss the ground you walk on one day can easily turn on you the next, and true partners in life are valuable and hard to find. So I wished he'd treat me like I'm valued. Instead he treats me like he thinks prettier, better, and just as loving as always around the corner. I apologized for the eye roll, but told him that if he wants marriage, I want a quick, committed timeline and genuine happiness from him to be marrying me. I don't need a big party. He listened to me and finally asked if this was about the money, security. He told me that being an executive's girlfriend required things of me, but if I wanted to work, I could have. He said he doesn't think I'm grateful enough for the position in society I was in due to his career, but that he's not mad about the eye roll. He said he didn't succeed by being that sensitive. He went on to say I was not his prisoner, so I can leave at any time, but to remember he won't tolerate being made my prisoner either via manipulation. He said that, for what it's worth, the engagement ring is mine and I could do whatever I wanted with it. He will also not be accused of not providing for his daughter, so be assured he won't SHK child support, but that he felt what I said before was emotional blackmail, so he no longer wants to go forward with marrying, but says if I'd like to travel with him, that's fine. Him traveling is non-negotiable, and so if I wanted to get a job, it would have to be a remote job. It was a sad conversation, and I spent a few hours alone after that. I felt I had nothing to lose, so I just asked him if he would support me getting an associate's, but that most associates for technical careers were in person. He then dropped the bombshell that if I wasn't traveling with him, he wasn't going to go those periods without sex. I was astounded by his callousness because he's back to take it or leave it. We fought again with me saying we all feeling the effects of age. I've supported him through health issues, and if he thinks he can just find somebody who has that loyalty I've shown him, he's wrong. At this point, I'm looking for ways out. I can't say I haven't been tempted to say I'll travel with him and try to get a remote job, but also realize how resentful I am that he continues to need to have the power in the relationship. I don't think I'll ever know my value truly, but something telling me there has to be better out there, at least in a partner. Edit. So I have decided to start sending in applications for work from home jobs, such as social media manager, operations assistant, and bookkeeper, as soon as I can get a resume together. I have downloaded templates online and I'm looking into displaced homemaker programs. There are some resume tip websites that are saying they have helped homemakers land 60 KLA jobs, and I am going to work hard on my resume. I hope that when they see my earnestness in the interview, they would be moved to take a chance on me instead of saying that a white-collar job is too much for me to ask for when I'm willing to work hard. I feel that after running a household that these operations and administration jobs, as well as social media management jobs, since I've done the photography for my family and friends, would be within my scope of experience. I hope my comments have not come off as spoiled or out of touch. I apologize if that has offended anyone. What I was trying to say is that I want to be able to rent a studio one-bedroom in a semi-safe neighborhood, and I've heard that new grads are able to make $45,000 to $50,000 a year semi-remote in business administration or marketing and then hit 70 to 80K in around 5 years, and hope that if I show my intent to get a certification in those fields, that employers would give me this opportunity for me to rise up the ranks. I just need somebody to take a chance on me and let me prove that I'm a hard worker. I am not above applying to the big box retailers and such, but the people who work there seem to all be teens or else adults with dubious criminal pasts, so for the sake of my safety as well as the promotion opportunities available with desk jobs, I would like to explore all my options. I will not sell the ring as of right now out of respect for my partner. However, if he shows me any more displays of disrespect, I will sell the ring. I will, however, do everything I can to prevent myself from falling into poverty, and if that means seeing a lawyer, I will do so. But in my opinion, new grads don't have that much more experience, and much less invested in a job so they can pick up and leave at any time, so I feel I'd be a more reliable hire. Update 2. It's been over a month since I last posted, and my life has changed drastically. For those who didn't see my previous posts, my boyfriend of 30 years proposed after I had begged him for 25 years, and I had rolled my eyes because it took 25 years and him not being an executive anymore. In response, he retracted the proposal. I really wish this update could have been positive, but I'm not doing well. But what remains is hope. Hope in the kindness of others, my grown kids, employers, courts, even my kid's dad. Hope in the value of love that I've given so freely to my kid's dad because I was raised to believe even those who don't appreciate the love I've given them will eventually self-actualize and pay it back. Here's what has happened since my kid's dad accused me of trying to keep him an emotional prisoner. I tried to show him I valued his freedom. I gave him his space and showed that I could live life without trapping him. I started doing that right after our discussion. His reaction was anger. After our talk, he started glaring and picking fights over everything, the speed at which I did housework, my spending within his allowance, and cut it to nearly zero, asked for the ring back during an argument. I took the comments to my post to heart, in particular, advice telling me that if badgered, I should refuse to leave the house. Just a few days after our conversation about the engagement, he picked a fight and accused me of ignoring him. He said he wanted me out. I said no, I deserve to be here. He responded by having a lawyer send me a notice telling me to vacate that day. It happened so quickly I was too shocked to react. My kids were torn between dad's bluffing and try to leave, but now he's filed to evict. It's up to the courts now. I tried looking for legal aid, but the person I talked to was cold and implied that my status as a mom and partner won't protect me from eviction. I've tried sending out applications for office jobs, but was told by friends to be kind to myself because if one rejection comes, something better will be along. My adult kids suggested I apply for SNAP food stamps, and I haven't out of shame. They said if I do and dad and I no longer live together, the government will help me collect child support. My grown kids said they can't risk upsetting a dad. My oldest told me a gas station was hiring night shift, and he'd try to help once he graduated. Just when I decided to just be grateful for the job, they rejected me after an interview where I feel I spoke well. That hurt, but I keep having hope because every day there are new remote and non-remote jobs posted saying they'll train the right candidate. I am applying to every corporation it seems with hope that one of them will take a chance on me, give me an interview that I will see me for somebody pulling herself up. I know my boyfriend wants me to beg, but I don't know if that would make him drop the suit. I just don't know anymore. I am in my corner of the house trying to keep things normal and applying like it's a job. I don't know what else to say, but that ends my update for now. I maintain hope and dignity. Update 3. The unconscionable happened. A judge is letting my ex-boyfriend evict me. A judge who is supposed to uphold the laws of fairness, morality, and for years I assumed kindness, found in favor of my ex-boyfriend. My head is spinning. I have not a job yet and I did everything right. I applied to hundreds upon hundreds of marketing jobs online. I've gotten 3 responses, but those responses ask me to download communication apps to do the interview, and their instructions are so hard to understand. I don't do well with non-concrete directions, so I got too aggravated to respond. However, at this point, I'm desperate enough to interview even there. I have taken the advice to apply to non-marketing jobs. My older daughter wrote me a resume for an office assistant job for a church that only offered 8 to 10 hours a week at $2 over minimum wage. I got called for an interview, and the pastor of all people seemed disappointed after seeing me and greeted me with a different tone than he greeted the next applicant who came in, a woman in her mid-20s. Horrible behavior from a mid-30s man. He even called me ma'am in this apprehensive tone. I did not get the job, but I feel bad for whoever does. I only have a few days before a sheriff arrives. I called my kids for help. My legal aid attorney predicted I'd only get visitation until I have a stable place, and child support would likely be enough to only partially pay for motel living, so I needed to quickly get a job. How can the world treat a mom like this? My adult kids arranged to meet me and told me there's a reason even their grandma called my ex an alley cat. They offered to sneak food from dining halls when I visit and lend me clothes for interviews, but said their dad laid down the law with regards to sending money, and they will not be sending me any money, and that when they get jobs of their own, they will also be prioritizing their own savings, and I should not expect any money, and that it's not my fault, but at some point, the shows of fickle affection they've seen during their childhood where they faced bullying and watched people like me, who are kind be scorned, jaded them, and in all that instability, accomplishments and money were the only constants, and that has made them emotionally apathetic, but that it's hard to fix because it goes hand in hand with the overactive having sense of self-preservation they've acquired. They blame it on watching how self-preservation got their dad far and the lack of it crushed others. I was able to sell the few things that my ex did not bother to claw away from me. I have enough to book a room at a motel for about a week, but then I don't know. I asked my newly 16-year-old if she'd want to stay with me when I get a motel room. She started crying and begging her dad to let me stay. I will fight for custody with every ounce of strength I have, but I'm guessing her siblings are telling her to enlist self-preservation and stay with her dad. I understand, I do, but she still needs her mom. I'm in contact with a shelter. Hopefully, I can find somebody who will fight for me to get housing, but I don't know what my future holds. Update 4. I want to apologize to everybody I have offended with my 3rd update. It's not my intention to look down on anybody, but I wish there was more understanding about how I had absolutely nobody to talk to. Nobody who responded to anything I had to say in my life. Nothing to say when I cried, pleaded, and explained, but I understand it's over now. All I have ever known. I have left my ex's house. I left a day before the sheriff was supposed to come. I could not stand my ex's taunts anymore. Saying goodbye to my daughter nearly broke me, but I am committed to finding a way to see her regularly. I spent 2 nights in a motel. I took advice about using the library as my safe place to apply for jobs during the day. I also paid some money to an online resume service where they said they had expertise in making homemakers' rooms employable. I also applied to retail jobs and heard back from one. I have an interview soon, but I'm scared because it only pays 50 cents above minimum wage, and just the cost of motels scares me. I am in the process of applying for SNAP. From my years in my former social circle, a lot of the wives were on boards for food banks and such. I know my money from selling the few things my ex didn't snatch away could have been stretched better, but the stress of leaving my daughter there made me buy comfort food and, I admit, also a drink to calm my nerves. My friends from that circle were mostly not communicating with me, but when it was known I was about to be homeless, suddenly they seemed to have renewed interest in me all at once, but not in the way of giving me any sort of assistance or emotional support. I asked one of the women about the food bank she used to host fundraisers for and the availability. She replied back with the availability. I went there but was humiliated that me telling her when I was going to go resulted in her and 3 others from that circle being around, claiming to be volunteering when they only hosted fundraisers, never volunteered on site when I arrived, and making a show out of asking a lot of probing questions, yet they started prattling on about party things, complaining about upcoming trips they knew I could now not be a part of. I left so downtrodden and will never go back. I have just spent my 2nd night in a shelter after needing to save the little I have left. I know I will be torn to pieces for saying this, but it was hard to be grateful to be there due to the pests, lack of cleanliness of others in the shelter, going to sleep with somebody next to me crying, somebody throwing up. I can only maintain hope that eventually things will look up, that I won't continue to be punished with grief and fear for wanting better. I hope I get the job I'm interviewing for. I shake at the thought of going back to the shelter again. They make us at a certain morning time. I am not this do-nothing leech. I just made the mistake of loving a man and hoping he'd value that. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I trusted my young sister-in-law to look after my child and asked her to live with me, but she ended up doing something very horrible. I, 34F, am married to my husband, 36M, and we have a 4-year-old daughter named Mila. My husband's job requires him to be away from home for days at a time, while I work a 9-to-5 job. Until recently, my parents were taking care of Mila while we were at work, but I felt guilty about burdening them as they're getting older. My husband's sister, Julia, 22F, lived nearby and worked part-time to cover her rent and expenses. I thought it might be a good solution to ask Julia to move in with us. She could help with Mila, and in return, she wouldn't have to worry about rent anymore. I discussed this with my husband, and he agreed it was a good idea. My husband talked to Julia about our proposal. At first, she declined, but the next evening she called to say she had changed her mind and was willing to move in. We were happy about this arrangement and thought it would work out well for everyone. Julia moved in a few days later, and things seemed to be going smoothly at first. However, after about a week, I started noticing that Mila was acting differently. She seemed hesitant to be around Julia and would often cling to me when Julia was in the room. This was unusual behavior for Mila, who is typically a friendly and outgoing child. I was concerned but didn't want to jump to conclusions. I decided to keep a closer eye on the situation and see if I could figure out what was going on. One day when my husband was away and Julia had gone out, I sat down with Mila to talk. I asked her gently if everything was okay and if there was any reason she didn't want to be around Aunt Julia. What Mila told me shocked and horrified me. She said that as soon as I left for work, Julia would put her in her playroom and lock the door from the outside, leaving her alone for hours at a time. Mila said she would cry and call for Julia, but Julia wouldn't come back until just before I was due to return from work. She would give her something to eat and check on her from time to time, but she would keep her locked in the playroom, giving excuses like, "She is just a child and should stay in her playroom surrounded by her toys." I'm devastated and angry. I can't believe Julia would do something like this to a 4-year-old child. I want to address this immediately, but I'm not sure how to proceed. Part of me wants to confront Julia directly and demand an explanation. Another part of me thinks I should set up a hidden camera to catch her in the act before I say anything. I'm also considering coming home early from work one day without telling Julia to see if I can catch her neglecting Mila. But I'm worried about what I might find and how it might affect Mila if she really is being locked up all day. I haven't told my husband yet because I want to be sure before I make such a serious accusation against his sister. But keeping this from him is eating me up inside. I'm torn about what to do next. Should I confront Julia directly? Should I try to gather more evidence first? Should I tell my husband immediately, even though I only have Mila's word to go on? Or should I find a way to stay home for a few days to observe what's happening myself? I'm also worried about the long-term implications if this is true. I don't think I can ever trust Julia with Mila again, but kicking her out would mean she has nowhere to go, and it could cause a huge rift in the family. On the other hand, if I'm wrong and Julia isn't doing this, I could be damaging my relationship with her for no reason. Maybe Mila misunderstood something or is making it up for attention, but why would she suddenly start acting so afraid of Julia if nothing was wrong? I want to protect my daughter, but I also don't want to accuse Julia of something so serious without being absolutely sure. I'm scared of making the wrong decision and either putting Mila at further risk or unfairly accusing Julia. How should I confront my sister-in-law about this? I'm desperate for advice on how to handle this situation. Update. First, I want to thank everyone for their advice on my previous post. After much consideration, I decided to install nanny cams in the common areas of our house to keep an eye on Julia and Mila. I didn't tell anyone about this, not even my husband or Mila. I felt guilty about the secrecy, but I needed to know the truth about what was happening when I wasn't home. The day after I installed the cameras, I pretended to leave for work as usual. Instead, I drove to a nearby mall and settled in at a coffee shop where I could monitor the camera feed on my phone. My heart was racing as I watched the live footage, hoping I was wrong about my suspicions. Unfortunately, my worst fears were confirmed. Shortly after I left, I saw Julia lead Mila to her playroom. She then closed the door and used a small key to lock it from the outside. I felt sick to my stomach watching this. Julia then went to the living room, sat on the couch, and started scrolling through her phone, completely ignoring Mila's calls and cries. I was about to rush home when something even more shocking happened. Julia got up and went to the kitchen's back door. She opened it and let in a hooded man. When he took off his hood, I froze in disbelief. It was Derek, my abusive ex-boyfriend. Seeing Derek brought back a flood of painful memories. We had dated for 2 years when I was in my mid-20s. At first, he was charming and attentive, but his true nature soon emerged. It started with small things, criticizing my clothes, getting jealous when I spent time with friends. Then it escalated to controlling behavior, constant put-downs, and eventually physical abuse. The first time he hit me, he apologized profusely and swore it would never happen again. I believed him, thinking it was a one-time mistake, but the abuse only got worse. He would fly into rages over minor things, throwing objects and shoving me. He isolated me from my friends and family, making me feel like he was all I had. I lived in constant fear, walking on eggshells to avoid triggering his anger. The emotional toll was even worse than the physical abuse. He made me doubt myself, my worth, and my sanity. I felt trapped and hopeless. It took me months to gather the courage to leave him. I moved to a different city and changed my phone number. It was difficult, but I slowly rebuilt my life. I hadn't seen or heard from Derek in years. The thought that he was now in my house, near my daughter, filled me with panic and rage. I watched in horror as Julia and Derek walked into her bedroom together. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I rushed to my car and sped home, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. How did Derek find me? How long had this been going on? Was Julia involved with him? Did she know about our history? When I reached home, I used my spare key to enter through the back door as quietly as possible. I could hear muffled sounds coming from Julia's room. My heart was pounding as I approached her door. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. I found Julia and Derek in a state of undress, clearly in the middle of an intimate moment. They both looked up in shock when I entered. Julia scrambled to cover herself, while Derek just stared at me, a mix of surprise and something else, maybe amusement on his face. For a moment we all just froze, the silence heavy with tension. Then I exploded. I started yelling at Julia, asking how she could do this. How could she neglect Mila, a helpless child, and bring a strange man into our house? I told her she had betrayed our trust in the worst possible way. Then I turned to Derek. All the fear and anger from our past relationship came pouring out. I yelled at him to get out of my house, telling him I would call the police if he ever came near me or my family again. I said I wasn't the same scared girl he used to control and abuse, that I wouldn't let him hurt me or anyone I loved ever again. Derek didn't say much. He just smirked and started getting dressed. Julia was crying and trying to apologize, but I was too angry to listen. I told them both to get out immediately. In the chaos, I suddenly remembered Mila. I rushed to her playroom and unlocked the door. She was huddled in a corner, looking scared and confused. I hugged her tightly, apologizing over and over for leaving her alone. I told her everything was going to be okay now. I took Mila to her bedroom and told her to stay there while I dealt with Julia and Derek. When I returned to Julia's room, Derek was gone. He must have slipped out while I was checking on Mila. Julia was fully dressed now, still crying and begging me to let her explain. I was in no mood for explanations. I told Julia she needed to leave our house immediately. She protested, saying she had nowhere to go, but I was adamant. I couldn't trust her around Mila anymore, and I certainly couldn't let her stay after what I'd seen. Once Julia was out of the house, I called my husband. I was shaking as I told him everything. The nanny cams, Julia neglecting Mila, and Derek. He was shocked and furious. He said he would catch the first flight home in the morning. Until then, he told me to lock all the doors and call the police if Derek or Julia tried to come back. After hanging up, I went to check on Mila. She was understandably shaken by everything that had happened. I did my best to comfort her, assuring her that she was safe now and that Aunt Julia wouldn't be looking after her anymore. I felt terrible for putting her through this ordeal. As the adrenaline wore off, the full weight of the situation hit me. I was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions. Anger at Julia and Derek, fear about what could have happened, guilt for not realizing sooner what was going on, and worry about what to do next. I spent a restless night, constantly checking on Mila and jumping at every little sound. I couldn't stop thinking about Derek. How had he found me? Was he planning to come back? The idea that he knew where I lived now terrified me. The next morning, my husband arrived home. We had a long, emotional conversation about everything that had happened. He was supportive and angry on my behalf, but also shocked that his sister could behave this way. We agreed that Julia couldn't be trusted to live with us anymore, but we were unsure about how to handle the situation with the rest of the family. We also discussed what to do about Derek. My husband wanted to go to the police immediately, but I was hesitant. I wasn't sure if they could do anything since he hadn't explicitly threatened me. Plus, the idea of having to recount our abusive relationship to strangers was daunting. In the end, we decided to consult with a lawyer before making any decisions. As for Mila, we agreed she needed to see a child therapist to help her process what had happened. We also decided to look into different childcare options, possibly a professional nanny or a reputable daycare center. It's been a few days since all this happened, and I'm still trying to process everything. I feel betrayed by Julia and angry at myself for not realizing what was happening sooner. The reappearance of Derek in my life has brought up a lot of old trauma that I thought I had dealt with. I'm also worried about the fallout with my husband's family. We haven't told them the full story yet, just that Julia is no longer living with us due to issues with childcare. I'm dreading having to explain everything, especially the part about Derek. My husband has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's taken time off work to be home with us and has been helping me look into security measures for our house. We're considering moving, but that feels like such a drastic step. Mila seems to be doing okay, all things considered. She's been clingy and has had some trouble sleeping, but she's also shown remarkable resilience. Her first session with the therapist is scheduled for next week. I haven't heard from Julia since I kicked her out. Part of me feels guilty for putting her out on the street, but a larger part is still too angry to care. I keep replaying the camera footage in my mind, seeing her lock my daughter away like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. As for Derek, there's been no sign of him. I'm torn between hoping he's gone for good and fearing that he's out there, planning his next move. I've been jumping at shadows and struggling to sleep, always half expecting him to show up. I know we have a long road ahead of us. There are still so many unanswered questions and decisions to be made. How do we explain this to the rest of the family? Should we press charges against Julia for child neglect? How do we ensure Mila feels safe and secure again? And how do I deal with the resurfaced trauma from my relationship with Derek? For now, we're taking it one day at a time. Our main focus is on Mila's well-being and making sure our home is safe. We're also looking into legal options and considering therapy for myself to deal with the reemergence of Derek in my life. I want to thank this community again for your support and advice. It gave me the courage to take action and potentially saved my daughter from further neglect or worse. If anyone has been through a similar situation or has advice on how to move forward, I would greatly appreciate it. This whole experience has left me feeling vulnerable and unsure, but I'm determined to stay strong for my family. Now on to the next story. Story 10. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the death of my boyfriend's wife, and I plan on leaving him right before it. There's too much to say, but I'll try to make it short. I'm using the Google Translator for most of the things, sorry. In short, I, 34F, have been dating Leon, 42M, for 2 years. My uncle became friends with Leon when they started working together, and he started coming to family gatherings and birthdays. Leon is a great guy, and we get along instantly. My family always talk to me about Leon, saying he's a great guy. One day, Leon asked me out on a date and I said yes. We started dating. Leon has 2 children, 14M and 12M. His wife died in an accident 9 years ago. Here comes the problem. Leon always talks about his wife. I know it sounds ugly to complain about it, but I don't say it with jealousy, I mean it uncomfortably. He mentions her in intimate moments of our time, such as when we finish having intimacy, or when we're having a date. Sometimes he just starts telling me random anecdotes about his wife, and I just stay there feeling like if I'm sleeping with a married man and I'm the side piece. I don't ask for much, just to have a date where it's just me and him, a date where I don't feel like someone's lover with a man who talks about the things we like. He goes to the psychologist, so according to him, he's working better on his grief, but I doubt it very much. I'm not the first girlfriend he had after his wife passed away. He still has contact with his wife's family, which is obvious. They are the grandparents of his children, and I have met them in person only one time because all they did was tell me how much Leon and his wife loved each other and treat me really bad. I remember that they put a video with photos of Leon and his wife when they married, while I was just standing there because they didn't even give me a chair to sit. I think in their minds is cute to me to see my boyfriend with his wife. IDK, it's not cute, it's weird. He always says in front of me that she was the love of his life. I find it cute, but when I think about the future, I'm just like, I really want to get old with a man who is making it clear that he will never love me. Is that the kind of love I want? I want to be the only one for my future husband. One time, I took him to my favorite place, and he just said, "It's beautiful. I wish wife's name was here so we could show her this. You two would have been good friends." It's like being a third wheel in my own relationship. I can tell a lot of situations like these, a lot. We talked about this. Most of the times he just says that he does that without thinking, but then he seems to forget about it and goes back to his usual behavior, and I'm tired. The only one time I talked about this with my family, I was only told that a real woman wouldn't be jealous of a dead woman. I'm not jealous, I'm uncomfortable, and would be happy to be with a man who has loved another woman like that, and expect him to love me almost the same, that I shouldn't expect him to love me in the same way, since all love is different, and that I should just be empathetic and supportive of him. I listened to them, but nothing got better. I've been feeling so much pressure to go through with this that I can't take it anymore. Anyways, I stopped listening to my family and finally talked with my friend who's a psychologist, and told me that his behavior is not healthy for anyone, and that I should think for myself. She texted, "Good for him for loving his wife so much, but you don't deserve to be used as an emotional support doll," and she's right. I have decided to cut off the relationship, but this year marks 10 years since the death of his wife. Not only his family, even my family is helping them to host a family reunion in honor of her, with the things she likes. I think it's a nice thing to do, but I'm totally ready to end the relationship, but I'm afraid I'm the bad guy in the story. The 10th anniversary is in July. I want to end the relationship now, but I fear that I will be a piece of if I do that in this year when he is so vulnerable, and even my family is pushing me to act like if I was his wife's best friend. He even says that his wife and I would be good friends if we had meet. Why would you want your wife to be best friends with the woman you're sleeping with right now? It's too weird. I think I'm insane because everyone around me sees it as something cute. In short, I don't know if I should break up with him right now or wait until, I don't know, next year. Would I be a piece of if I break up with him now? Update. A few people who lived the same situation messaged me, and that really helped me to feel understood. I finally talked with all my friends about everything he did. I always avoided doing that because I knew they were going to tell me that I should leave him, but I just ended up being trapped by everyone else's words. We didn't love each other, and that's obvious, even if he says doesn't think so. Yes, I actually posted to get approval. I don't know how bad is that, but I needed to know that I was doing things right and that I'm not crazy. Before I said the truth to my friends, the next day I finally talked to Leon. I really needed to break up at that point. He came to see me at my house, and I told him we needed to talk. I went straight to the point, saying I want to end the relationship, and he instantly asked me what he did wrong. We literally had this talk before, and he does know what things makes me feel uncomfortable. I was tired, so I just proceeded to list everything he did, how he never defended me from his ex's in-law, how he never made an effort to stop naming his wife all the time. Even though I told him 1,000 times that it made me uncomfortable, how does he make me feel like I'm the third in my own relationship, etc.? He apologized, saying the same as always, that he doesn't realize it when he does that. We've had this discussion before many times, but this time I told him I want to break up. I also told him that I don't think his therapist is helping, but Leon just said the H is helping him and feels mentally well. Leon told me that we could start going together with his therapist because he knows that it can be hard for a woman to be with a widower. Jealousy is a normal thing in this kind of cases, and that really triggered me. I've let both his and my family make me believe that I'm a crazy jealous. I've let even blogs about widower couples fill my head with things like, you just have to be empathetic. Don't expect him to love you. He's always going to love his first wife more. So just get used to it and be a good woman. I've let myself be trampled on just because everyone told me that getting over a loss is difficult and I have to be empathetic and think about the other. I'm so damn tired of it. I'm tired of being empathetic. I've been dragging this thought for months, and in that moment, I just burst out. We yelled at each other. We said a lot of things to each other, but at the end of it all, he went on with his mentality that I'm wrong and I'm just jealous. He said that I clearly don't feel ready to date a widower, and I ended up being like his ex. I told him that he's a hypocrite, that he filled his mouth talking shits about his ex-girlfriend, but now I'm sure that he treated her like he treated me. He probably took a submissive woman to fulfill the void and took us as sex dolls. None of that echoed in his mind because he left my house saying I'm just jealous of a ghost and I disappointed him. I'm fed up. I'm so angry while I write this. As soon as he left the house, I sended my mother a message saying that I am not going to live the same life of my asile, living in the shadow of a woman who's no longer in this world, and they should have empathy for me and not for a man who's not even their family. I told her that I'm tired of being pressured, and I don't care if I die single. I'm sure they don't care about how I feel. In the end, they will keep saying that I have a cold heart like always, but I want to not care about that anymore. My friends are staying at my house to keep me company, and I can finally get all the accumulated out of my brain with them. I don't feel good being second, and I know I'll always be second. I don't want to replace the place of the first wife, and I know that even if I wanted to, I never will. I know a lot if people feels good with that kind of relationship, but not me. Maybe I'm really cold-hearted, but I'm surely not that empathetic. If his wife were alive, he would clearly never choose me, he wouldn't even look at me. I don't like that kind of love, and I really had a hard time accepting that I don't want that kind of love for myself. I feel that I am still young, and I can wait for a man to have me as the first choice in his heart. I hope Leon can overcome his traumas and happy, but not with me. Someone messaged me that I don't deserve his love. But what love are we talking about? I'm just a sex doll at this point. For now, he's not going to change and doesn't want to change, but that's not my business. I'm not a bedroom therapist anymore. I'd rather be single forever than falling again in that. I want to start more therapy and Pilates. I'm still obviously affected by all of this, and nothing really changed, nothing would change that fast, but I'm just happy that I'm free now. For now, I just wanted to vent. So sorry if everything sounds too aggressive. Now on to the next story. Story 11. I regret throwing my marriage away and divorcing my husband. I, 30F, divorced my husband, 34M, around 3 years ago. We had been a couple since high school and got married as soon as I graduated college, and he had started working at a public sector bank for a year. I also had a job lined up, so I also joined the workforce as soon as we returned from honeymoon. Work life and marriage life was not how I had expected at all. With both of us working full-time, we barely had any time during weekdays. I had both Saturday and Sunday off, but my husband had to work Saturdays as well. 2 words into our marriage, I had started resenting my husband for never being available for me. IDK why I started feeling like that, but my mind made me feel like now that we are married, he lost his attraction towards me, which was total BS because every bit of free time he had, he spent it on taking care of my needs. I increasingly became cold towards him, not reciprocating his affection. I made excuses to avoid date nights, made up work pressure when he tried to arrange vacations, fake tiredness to not have sex, excuses to not go and visit his parents even though they had always treated me like their own daughter for years. I still can't explain why. I just kept thinking that I'm wasting my youth away in this marriage. Obviously, the marriage wasn't working well. My husband asked me many times over the years about going to therapy or open up to him if he hurt me somehow for me to be so indifferent to him. I always cut him off saying that I was fine. I had completely checked out of the marriage. I still remember the hurt in his eyes when I asked for divorce. He tried to change my mind many times, but I filed for divorce against both mine and my husband's families. I did not ask for anything from the divorce apart from my share of our marital house. It was sold pretty fast, and he let me have 60% of the value despite me having wanted half of it. It was an amicable divorce, as my husband understood that I wouldn't change my mind no matter what. After divorce, I felt free for the first time in ages, but the newfound freedom didn't last long. All my life, I had the love and company of my parents, and then my husband, but now I was all alone. My parents absolutely loved my husband and were devastated at my divorce. They cut off all contact with me when I went on with the divorce. My ex-husband's parents tried to reach out a few times, but I never picked up. Even then, I hadn't come to my senses and thought that things would surely improve. I requested a transfer to a different state for a change of scenario, and the company happily agreed to send me to a state with manpower shortage. I started dating for the first time in my life, having absolutely zero experience. Loads of men tried to take advantage of me, but thankfully I at least had some semblance of self-respect and did not want to sleep around immediately. It was then I realized that those men were just there for the sex, and as I did not give them that, they immediately ghosted. After some time, I gave in and started sleeping on first dates, but the sex was terrible, not even a fraction of how sex was with my ex-husband. Even after sleeping around, it was obvious that these men were only around for the sex and had absolutely zero interest in a romantic relationship. It got so bad that I stopped going out at all. It has been over a year and a half since I went out on a date or even had dinner with another person. I get up, go to the office, work, get home, get dinner, sleep, repeat. The weekends are when it actually hits how lonely I am, and what an absolute idiot I have been throwing away a perfectly stable life. I have somewhat reconnected with my mother. Father said that his daughter passed away the moment I signed those divorce papers. She informed me last week that my ex-husband has gotten engaged to his girlfriend of 1 year. Apparently my ex-husband had gotten into a pretty bad car accident and admitted to the hospital for nearly 3 months. It was there that he was placed under care of his fiancée, who was in her final year of clinical internship. My mother was extra nasty when she told me the news. She said something along the lines of, "I hope you're happy now that he has realized his mistake of marrying someone like you and is finally moving on with his life." At this point, I don't even have any tears left to cry. I'm all cried out after almost a full year of crying myself to sleep every single night. After what I have done, I don't even have the nerve of reaching out to him to congratulate him on his engagement and maybe ask for forgiveness. All I feel is constant headaches and dull pain throughout my body. It's laughable how I managed to destroy a life that many people would kill to have. The only thing I'm proud of myself is that I did not trap my ex-husband with a child. A person like me deserves to die alone. Now on to the next story. Story 12. My husband's best friend started flirting with me, and when I told my husband, he accused me of having feelings for his friend. Then his friend moved in with us and things got way worse. I, 26F, find myself in a situation that's slowly eroding my marriage and my sanity. It involves my husband, Bruce, 28M, and his best friend, Alex, 30M. I've been with Bruce for 6 years, married for 3, and I thought I knew what I was getting into when I said, I do, but now I'm not so sure. Bruce and Alex have been inseparable since they were kids. They grew up on the same street in a small town in Oregon, where everyone knew everyone else's business. Bruce was the shy, bookish type, always with his nose in a comic book or playing video games. Alex was the golden boy, charismatic, athletic, and popular. By all accounts, they shouldn't have been friends, but they clicked from day one. I met Bruce in college. We were both English majors, bonding over our shared love of obscure poetry and indie films. He was different from the guys I dated before, thoughtful, kind, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. Our relationship progressed quickly, and before I knew it, I was head over heels. Then Alex entered. Bruce had told me stories about his best friend, but nothing prepared me for the whirlwind that was Alex. He breezed into our lives during spring break of our junior year, all charm and easy smiles. I remember thinking he looked like he'd stepped out of a J. Crew catalog. Perfectly messy hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that could melt ice. At first, I was thrilled that Bruce had such a close friend. Growing up as an only child with parents who moved around a lot for work, I'd never experienced the kind of bond Bruce and Alex shared. They had inside jokes that spanned decades, could communicate with just a look, and seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. But as time went on, I started to notice things. The way Alex's eyes would linger on me a bit too long, how he always managed to sit next to me at group gatherings, the subtle touches that could be passed off as friendly, but felt charged with something more. I tried to brush it off. After all, Alex was a notorious flirt. He'd had a string of girlfriends throughout college, never settling down with anyone for more than a few months. I figured it was just his nature, and as long as I maintained clear boundaries, everything would be fine. Bruce and I got married right after graduation. It was a small ceremony in Bruce's hometown, with Alex as the best man. I still remember his toast. He talked about how Bruce had always been there for him through thick and thin, and how he knew I would make Bruce happy because I was basically the female version of him. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now, those words haunt me. After the wedding, Bruce and I moved to Seattle for his job at a tech startup. I found work as a copywriter for a local advertising agency. Life was good. We were young, in love, and building our future together. Alex moved to Seattle 6 months later. He claimed it was for a job opportunity, but I couldn't help wondering if there was more to it. He quickly became a fixture in our lives, always dropping by unannounced, joining us for dinner, tagging along on weekend trips. Things started to change about a year ago. Alex began dating Sierra, a pediatric nurse he met at a charity event. She was sweet and down to earth, and for a while, I thought Alex had finally found someone who could keep him grounded. But 3 months ago, they broke up. Alex was devastated. Apparently, Sierra wanted to have children, but Alex had gotten a vasectomy years ago, adamant that he didn't want kids. The breakup was messy, with Alex accusing Sierra of trying to change him. Since then, Alex has been leaning on us, particularly me, for emotional support. He'll call or text at odd hours, wanting to talk about his feelings or seeking advice. I've noticed he rarely reaches out to Bruce for these heart-to-hearts, preferring to confide in me instead. Last weekend, things came to a head. We were at a mutual friend's birthday party, and Alex had clearly had too much to drink. Bruce was engrossed in a game of pool with some colleagues, leaving me to deal with an increasingly handsy Alex. He cornered me in the kitchen, his breath reeking of whiskey. He slurred, leaning in close. "Bruce is a lucky guy. If I'd met you first." He trailed off, his hand coming to rest on my waist. I froze, unsure of how to react without causing a scene. Thankfully, another friend walked in at that moment, breaking the tension. Alex stumbled away, leaving me shaken and confused. Now I'm at a loss. Do I tell Bruce about Alex's behavior? I'm worried it could destroy their friendship, and I don't want to be the cause of that. But I also can't continue like this, constantly on edge around someone who's supposed to be a close friend. To make matters worse, we have a camping trip planned next month. Just the 3 of us. It's an annual tradition that started back in college, but the thought of being isolated in the woods with Bruce and Alex for a whole weekend fills me with dread. I love Bruce with all my heart, and I value the friendship we've built with Alex over the years, but I'm starting to feel like I'm caught in the middle of something I never asked for. There's a part of me that wonders if I'm overreacting. Maybe Alex is just going through a rough patch and needs support. Maybe I'm reading too much into innocent gestures. But then I remember the look in his eyes at the party, the weight of his hand on my waist, and I know in my gut that something isn't right. I thought about talking to Sierra, Alex's ex, to get her perspective, but I'm worried that might be crossing a line. Plus, I don't want to drag her into this mess if I'm just imagining things. Bruce has always been somewhat oblivious to social cues. It's one of the things I love about him, his innocent, trusting nature. But now I find myself wishing he were more perceptive. Maybe if he noticed Alex's behavior, I wouldn't have to be the one to bring it up. I'm lost and could really use some advice. How do I navigate this minefield without blowing up my marriage or my husband's most important friendship? Should I confront Alex about his behavior? Or do I need to have a serious conversation with Bruce about setting some boundaries with his best friend? I feel like I'm walking a tightrope, and one wrong move could send everything crashing down. Any insights or experiences would be greatly appreciated. Date 1. It's been a month since my original post, and I wish I could say things have improved. Unfortunately, the situation has only become more complicated and distressing. First, I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Your advice and support gave me the courage to have a conversation with Bruce about Alex's behavior. It didn't go as well as I'd hoped. When I brought up my concerns, Bruce was initially dismissive. He laughed it off, saying, "That's just how Alex is, he's a friendly guy." When I pressed the issue, describing some of Alex's more inappropriate actions, Bruce's demeanor changed. He became defensive, accusing me of misinterpreting things, or worse, encouraging Alex's attention. "Maybe you're the one who's developing feelings for him," Bruce snapped. "Is that why you're suddenly so obsessed with his behavior?" I was stunned. I've never given Bruce any reason to doubt my loyalty, and his accusation hurt deeply. We argued for hours, with Bruce vacillating between dismissing my concerns and accusing me of impropriety. By the end of the night, we were sleeping in separate rooms, and the tension in our house was palpable. The next day, Bruce apologized for his outburst, but I could tell he still didn't fully believe me. He suggested that maybe I was just feeling insecure because of how close he and Alex are. It felt like he was gaslighting me, making me question my own perceptions. Despite my misgivings, we went ahead with the camping trip as planned. I hoped that being in a neutral environment might help clear the air. Couldn't have been more wrong. The first night around the campfire started pleasantly enough. We roasted marshmallows, shared stories, and for a while, it felt like old times. But as the night wore on, and the beer flowed freely, things took a turn. Alex, emboldened by alcohol, became increasingly flirtatious. He kept finding excuses to sit next to me, his thigh pressing against mine. At one point, while Bruce was fetching more firewood, Alex leaned in close and whispered, "You know, I've always wondered what it would be like if we'd met first, before Bruce." I recoiled, making it clear his advances were unwelcome, but the damage was done. Bruce returned just in time to see me pushing Alex away, and his face darkened with anger and hurt. The rest of the trip was a disaster. Bruce alternated between giving me the cold shoulder and picking fights over trivial things. Alex, seemingly oblivious to the tension he'd caused, continued to try and engage me in private conversations. By the time we returned home, I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own marriage. Bruce's trust in me seemed shattered, and he began checking my phone when he thought I wasn't looking. He started making snide comments about my relationship with Alex, implying that I was the one pursuing his best friend. Things came to a head last week when Bruce announced that Alex would be staying with us for a while. Apparently, Alex had lost his job and needed a place to crash until he got back on his feet. Bruce didn't even consult me before making this decision. I tried to protest, explaining how uncomfortable I was with the idea, but Bruce shut me down. "He's my best friend," he said coldly. "I'm not going to abandon him just because you're feeling insecure." So now Alex is living in our guest room. The atmosphere in the house is unbearable. Bruce spends most of his time with Alex, leaving me feeling like an outsider in my own home. When we are together, Bruce is distant and suspicious, questioning my every move. Alex, for his part, seems to be reveling in the situation. He's constantly around, inserting himself into every aspect of our lives. He walks around shirtless, makes suggestive comments when Bruce isn't within earshot, and finds excuses to be alone with me. I feel like I'm losing my mind. My marriage is crumbling. My husband doesn't trust me, and I'm living under the same roof as someone who's actively trying to undermine my relationship. I've thought about leaving, but where would I go? Bruce and I moved to the city for his job, and all our friends here are really his friends. I feel isolated and trapped. I don't know what to do anymore. How did things spiral so out of control? How do I fix this mess when my husband won't even listen to me? I'm starting to wonder if there's any way to salvage my marriage, or if I'm fighting a losing battle. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how much longer I can stay afloat. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and I'm still reeling from everything that's happened. I want to thank everyone who reached out with support and advice. Your words gave me strength when I needed it most. The situation with Bruce and Alex continued to deteriorate. Living under the same roof as Alex became unbearable. He grew bolder in his advances, often cornering me when Bruce wasn't around. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, constantly on edge and afraid to be alone. Bruce's behavior didn't improve either. He became increasingly paranoid, accusing me of sneaking around with Alex behind his back. The trust between us was completely shattered. One night, after a particularly nasty argument, Bruce stormed out of the house. He didn't come back until the next morning, reeking of alcohol and refusing to tell me where he'd been. I knew I couldn't continue living like this. I reached out to my sister, Emma, who lives a few hours away. I confided in her about everything that had been happening. She was horrified and immediately offered me a place to stay. The day I decided to leave was both the hardest and easiest of my life. I waited until both Bruce and Alex were out of the house. I packed a bag with essentials, wrote a note explaining that I needed some time away to think, and left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter. As I drove away, I felt a mixture of relief and heartbreak. I've been staying with Emma for the past week, trying to process everything that's happened. Bruce has been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between angry accusations and tearful pleas for me to come home. I've blocked Alex's number entirely. Yesterday, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Sierra, Alex's ex-girlfriend. She had heard through mutual friends about what was happening and wanted to talk. What she told me left me stunned. Apparently, Alex has a history of pursuing his friends' partners. Sierra revealed that before they started dating, Alex had made advances on his previous best friend's girlfriend, causing a huge rift in their friendship group. She also told me that Alex's vasectomy story was a lie. He had never had one. He simply used it as an excuse to break up with women when things got too serious. Armed with this new information, I decided it was time to confront Bruce. I asked him to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between Emma's place and our home. When Bruce arrived, he looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. Before he could say anything, I laid out everything I knew: Alex's history, his lies, and his persistent harassment. I told Bruce about all the times Alex had made me uncomfortable, the things he said and did when Bruce wasn't around. To my surprise, Bruce broke down. Through tears, he confessed that he had suspected something was off with Alex for a while but didn't want to believe it. He admitted that his accusations and paranoia stemmed from his own insecurities and fear of losing me. Bruce revealed that the night he didn't come home, he had actually confronted Alex about his behavior. Alex had denied everything, gaslighting Bruce and playing on their years of friendship. Bruce, confused and hurt, had spent the night driving around trying to sort out his feelings. We talked for hours, laying everything out on the table. Bruce apologized profusely for not believing me, for letting his insecurities cloud his judgment, and for putting our marriage in jeopardy. He told me he had kicked Alex out of our house the day after I left, finally seeing through his manipulations. I'm still processing everything. While I'm relieved that Bruce finally believes me, I'm hurt that it took me leaving for him to see the truth. The trust between us has been severely damaged, and I'm not sure if it can be fully repaired. For now, I'm staying with Emma. Bruce and I have agreed to start couples counseling to work through our issues. We both recognize that we have a long road ahead of us if we want to save our marriage. As for Alex, Bruce has cut all ties with him. We've heard through the grapevine that he's trying to spin the story to make himself look like the victim. But thankfully, most of our friends have seen through his lies. I'm taking things one day at a time. I'm focusing on healing and figuring out what I want for my future. Whether that future includes Bruce remains to be seen, but I'm committed to putting myself first and not letting anyone make me feel unsafe or unvalued ever again. Thank you all for your support through this ordeal. Your advice and kind words have been a lifeline during the darkest moments. I'll update again when I have more clarity on where things stand. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.